Can you
Okay,
see I'm
okay. What'd you say, Blanche?
can you see I'm delayed?
You're a little delayed, but we can work with it. I think so. The way that I've seen this work in the past is as the show progresses, it gets better in terms of the latency and so on. So it looks like Keisha just dropped off. I'm not sure why. So we're live now. We got Blanche over there on the far left of your screen. We got Mr. Chuck Littleton in the middle of the screen, and then you have yours truly, Chad O. Jackson. So guys, the way that this all started was I saw a teacher. She was recommending April Ryan's new book, Black Women Will Save the World. And I was like, what is this mess? And then not even like a day later, I'm listening to C-SPAN and I'm driving and I hear none other than April Ryan being interviewed about this book that she just released. And I thought it would be perfect uh, subject matter to go over this evening. And it just so happens that Blanche went live today, and he was talking about some of the same concepts of Black women saving the world, this whole narrative that they're trying to push. So go over a little bit, Blanche, what you were discussing today on your live, on your YouTube.
Well, I mean, I was talking about how it's this big push to elevate black women. If you think about it, they're putting black women everywhere. I mean, politics, TV, entertainment, movies. Like think about the Black Panther's a woman now. I think Iron Man is a black woman. Like, oh, they're going overboard with it. And I think it's just intentional because they're pushing this narrative that black women are going to save the world. I believe it's the opposite, though. I believe that eventually everybody's going to be a black woman, and it's going to be the end of the world, actually. Um, Even the whole thing with protect black women, it's just to me them as saying anti-Semitic. You say protect black women is like a term, but what does it even actually mean? Protect them from what? And so I just feel like with this whole Megan Tory thing and all this stuff, I just feel like it's just this push to put black women in a position of leadership everywhere. Ultimately, to just drown out men, black men specifically. This whole feminism push. It's a lot easier to use black women because they make it more fashionable with your Cardi B's and your Lizzos and your Kamalas and your Michaels and all them. They make it more fashionable, to usher in this black. I call it black women culture, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Um, are you talking to us on your phone or your computer?
On my iPad, you can hear me.
Your iPad. Okay. For some reason, your audio is coming in really good, but it sounds a little turbulent. So if you can switch the audio up or something, I don't know if you can do that from your iPad.
Yeah, I can.
Maybe put some headphones in or something like that to
Yeah.
clear that up. But I did get what you were saying. And by the way, guys, we're all wearing the Worship God Not Man shirts and hoodies, but we didn't plan this. It just so happens that we're all wearing that this evening. What's up, Chuck?
This question for you because I have your YouTube channel up because I'm using my phone, but I have the YouTube channel up on my desktop right in front of me, and it just is pending. It says that your live is starting at 9:30.
Oh, interesting.
So I don't know. I don't know. I don't think anyone heard what Blanche just said.
Amazing.
I think I'm yeah. I don't know if you started up yet.
All right. What about now?
Let me see.
Is that better?
How does he sound, Chuck?
That sounded good.
Go ahead and give me a test reading real quick.
Testing 1, 2.
Yeah, that sounds better.
Sounds better.
Yeah, it's live. We're getting some comments now. Okay, cool.
Okay.
So Keisha, as soon as it went live, it said it kicked Keisha out. So I'm not sure why it did that. Anyway, okay. So yeah, we're all wearing the Worship God Not Man hoodies and shirts, but we didn't plan this. It just so happened to work out this way. So
Yeah.
while Keisha's trying to connect, Blanche, you went live today, and the reason I'm having you repeat this is because apparently all that you just said wasn't even live. So you went live today. You were talking about this concept of the left wanting to turn everybody into a black woman. Now, expound on that if you can.
Yes, I noticed back in 2020 when they were interviewing women, at the riots, whether they were white or black, they had the same script. They were all saying, "I'm a single mother, I have kids, it's hard to make it." But they all had the same script. And so I started seeing this thing where, even with the trans community, I started seeing that they just start really emulating the stereotypical black woman. And then this term came out where it said protect black women. And I was just asking from what? Nobody's ever specific about what we're protecting black women from. And so when certain things pop up, they use the term. But to me, the term is kind of like just saying anti-Semitic. Like, what does the term even mean? And so what I see the left doing is, if you notice, I could be in a major city and you'll see black women on like the buses, sides of buses, billboards, everywhere. If you actually stop and just look, you'll see black women represented in every facet of society to a high level, even commercials. If you think about even Ketanji Brown, even Kamala Harris, even who else is major? Think about Maxine Waters she's like 100. She's still in politics. So it's just, I see this push to elevate the black woman, but I believe it's to do it to get people to be like black women. If you think about it, black women get married at about 27%. Black women are quote unquote independent, quote unquote successful. Black women get divorced the most. Black women are single mothers the most. It's almost like they're pushing this narrative to get the women to be like black women as a sign of freedom, like independence, from this quote unquote patriarchy. But that's what I've just noticed. And then when this whole Megan Tory thing, it's almost like nobody cared about the case just as long as Meg came out on top. Like, they didn't care about anything, just as long as she's the hero in the end, that's all we care about. And so to me, even this whole trial was like a test run to get people to focus on, opinion more than fact. So now it's almost like you can't even question black women anymore. If you think about it, even if, for example, with Tory, let's say he's guilty as 100%. Let's say everything is factual. What does this change about what Meg represents?
Mm-hmm.
Is she still beneficial for our community? Is she still a beacon of hope for our young girls? Like, no. So what does this trial actually do for her, but besides make her invincible now? Because you're not going to be able to question her because she went from a victim to a hero. Same with Cardi B. Same with Lizzo. They're pushing this image out there so that the other women are going to follow this. That this is like a liberating way to be. And I saw it in 2020. Every woman they were interviewing was saying she was a single mother. I'm like, what's going, like, it's the same script. They were overweight. Sorry to say, they were plus size. I'm a single mom trying to make it out here. It's tough. So I just see this whole push to make everybody, or at least every woman, a black woman.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that is they're also pushing gayness up. The most flamboyantly gay men that I see, regardless of what color they are, they can be Asian, Mexican, black, white, whatever. The most flamboyantly gay men that I see remind me of the stereotypical ghetto black woman. I know that's not exactly a PC thing to say on the internets, but I've always noticed that. Just as a side note, what you have any response to that, Chuck? Before we play this first clip.
Let me say first and foremost, I had just texted a friend of mine, and I had texted my wife literally maybe like 3 or 4 days ago, and I said, "Am I like the last person on earth to find out that Megan Thee Stallion got shot?" Because I had no clue. I'm a lame, y'all. That's not my. I don't. I'm not in that world. It's funny because I just watched Blanche, his reel. It's breaking that down today, as a matter of fact. Because I said, man, you know what? Because I don't even know who. Like, I didn't even know how to pronounce Tory Lanez. Is it? I'm like Lannis, Lanez. I wasn't even sure how to pronounce his name. I'm like, I don't even know what he does. I don't know if he's a rapper, a producer, a manager. I don't know what he does. But I said, man, if Blanche is talking about this, I need to figure out what's going on, right? But that's just a total aside. I'm so lame. I didn't even know about it,
What kind of music do you listen to,
but I
Chuck?
don't really
And you know,
have much to
really,
add to that.
oh, let's go ahead.
What kind of music I listen to?
Yeah.
I mean, I listen to all types of music. I mean, I listen to a little rap, like just the rap I grew up on, late '80s, early to mid '90s. I don't really do a lot of the new schools. I don't do any of the new school stuff, as a matter of fact. Just the messaging and everything that they say. I mean, here I am, a 39-year-old, married man with 4 children, living in a subdivision in a suburb of Detroit. I mean, I can't vibe with the killer nigga shooter bang bang. It's like, I mean, really?
Yeah.
I'm a middle-aged dad. You know what I'm saying? That's what I look like. It just don't gel with me. When I was, like it used to, when you're young and rambunctious and rebellious and everything is like F the world. You think you're raging against the machine when you're really just destroying yourself, but you don't have the requisite wisdom to understand that. But, now that I'm a middle-aged man, it all just seems foolish to me.
Yeah.
But I like a lot of different stuff, man.
Got you.
Um, yeah. Yeah, I heard one time I heard you, Chad, you had went live, and before you had got into your spiel, I kind of heard that Donda album playing in the background. I said, "Okay, Chad, I see you." And I started to text you and tease you a little bit because I heard you listening to Kanye, but I said, "No, I'm gonna just leave him alone." But no, so it's not really much I can add on to what Blanche has already said. I mean, black women have swallowed the bait, hook, line, and sinker. When it comes to the promises of the left, of course. And I wrote something down when Blanche was talking about abandoning the patriarchy, and that's what and that was the goal, of course, of the communists from the late 19th century all the way up until today. Because when you abandon the patriarchy, of course, you trade in the authority of your husband and the nuclear family, and you trade that in for the state.
Mm.
It reminded me of Friedrich Engels' work that was published a year after Karl Marx died. As a matter of fact, I think the year was 1884, I want to believe it was, and it was titled "The Origins of the Family, Private Property, and the State." And in that work, Friedrich Engels pretty much summed up his attitude about women, about wives more specifically, and the nature of housework. And he believed that housework should be collectivized so that the strength of the woman's labor could be utilized for more what Friedrich Engels referred to as productive work. So factories and farming and these, various things. And so a woman's labor should be collectivized by the state because the woman does not belong in the home, because being a housewife was a sort of bourgeois act that did not belong in the private sector. And so, to Blanche's point, you use black women to do it. And so what that does inevitably is it empowers the state
Yeah.
and undermines the individual, for sure.
And interestingly enough, John Dewey, who's the father of American public school education, and the centralization of public schools, he argued the same thing with regard to children, because it used to be the case, and there's still some remnants of this that exist today, where children are, they have chores, they have responsibilities in the household, and they're getting an education from mom and dad in terms of the way of life from a practical point of view, but also learning the books from an academic point of view. And And then amongst that, you're getting a well-rounded education. These were the days where children were educated either at home or in a one-room schoolhouse, so on and so forth. And what John Dewey set out to do was to, in a sense, pry children from the educational grip of their parents and to vest that authority into the public schools. And he wrote about this in The Education Fetish, which was published in, I think, 1898 or something like that. So anyway, just an interesting side point.
May I also add to Chad as well that Friedrich Engels also spoke about children, because you brought up children, and of course the responsibility of, say, child care and these various things that was typically a task of the wife traditionally. Friedrich Engels said that responsibility should be given to the community, i.e. the state. And so this is how you could foster a healthy community, is to have the state. And so, the child care expenses and everything else should be paid for by the state, so that the labor of the wife could be collectivized. And so there is no authority outside of that of the state.
And what's this brings up a good point about slogans. The reason they work politically is because, and Keisha could probably speak to this as somebody who worked in politics, but the reason why slogans work politically is because you can take a kind of universal truth that is difficult to dispute and use those slogans or that universal truth to then push something more nefarious. Like, for example, it takes a village to raise a child. There's a lot of people, regardless of what side of the political spectrum that you're on, who would say yes and amen to that. However, when you have folks on the left who are trying to push socialism, and in the socialist worldview, it takes a village to do everything, not just raise a child, but to do everything. Everything is looked at from a collective point of view. Whereas, as Christians, as individual-minded people, of course, we believe that it's incumbent upon the mother and the father to be present first and foremost with each other and then with their children. And so it's interesting just how easy these slogans are able to, in a sense, manipulate people into going along with something that they probably didn't mean to go along with in terms of what its ultimate result is, if that makes sense. So anyway, go ahead, Keisha.
I heard you guys were when I first came on, we're talking about John Dewey. So I'm guessing you were talking about the American education system. I don't know how familiar everybody is with Prussia and how the American education system was imported from Prussia, and it was birthed in Prussia as a way, this compulsory mass education was birthed to control the free thinkers. And so it was never meant to educate. It was meant to dumb down, kill the imagination, and to create minions of the state. And so when John Dewey and all these first people went over and they saw this system, they were like, oh, wow, this is fantastic. So they brought it over. And here we have, we went from that one room schoolhouse that was really educating the minds of Americans really well. That's when we were developing a lot of the great things, when we had the great philosophers, thinkers, writers. We were producing those types of things. And now we have this collective mindset where the kids are dumbed down. The family is destroyed. The family is pit against, the children are pit against their parents. And here we have, minions of the state. And this, I don't even like to call it an education system, because it's not education, it's schooling. Schooling is different than educating. Schooling is like a machine, like a manufacturing machine. It's like you're churning out these people that only think one thing, they only do one thing, and they can only be one thing. And that is socialism. Well, I say communist, because I think that's the ultimate goal for these people. And it's sad, because like that's how these slogans can go so there's no pushback. There's no one thinking like, okay, well, when I hear Black Lives Matter, or when I hear it takes a village to raise a child, or, you know, whatever the slogan is, no one is really thinking about, okay, what does this really mean? And then another slogan comes out of that saying, oh, well, it's not just Black Lives Matter, it's all lives matter, or this and that. So, and then it creates, you know, like more slogans instead of people drilling down and just asking the question, okay, what are we even talking about here?
Yeah.
And so it just keeps this cycle going of more slogans, more nonsense, more headed down the path of communism. And it's sad because America, you know, is really something special. When you look at it, you know, against all other nations, and it's really destroyed from the inside out, which is, you know, was predicted. So
Yeah. It definitely has become a war of slogans. People on the right are slinging slogans at people on the left, and vice versa. And I think that's indicative of where we are in terms of the collective IQ of America right now, where we are so significantly dumbed down to where it's like we don't know how to argue based on substance, based on the intricacies of our ideas. I was talking to a woman, and I posted this on my IG a couple days ago, where she kept using the word imperialism. And I was like, well, you keep using that word. Like, what do you think that word means? And I was able to kind of tie her up in a knot. And she thought she sounded really smart. But, you know, it's easy to call something and to demean something as imperialist or the work of colonists and so on and so forth, and have no idea what you're talking about. But because you hear these things very perpetually, you think that you know what you're talking about when you don't. So anyway, so
you know what I find funny, just if I can, just really quick, what's funny is when people say, like, you know, the colonists and things like that, especially when Christians say it, because the Bible says that we are to subdue the earth and have dominion over it. That means go and take over stuff. You know, and so when they're like, oh, it's like, no, you need to go and do that too. Like, go and colonize you some stuff.
Right. Yeah. Colonization is a very good thing, especially when you have a bunch of barbarians, you know, killing each other and ripping off each other's scalps and things of that nature. I think colonization.
Well, not that way, but
no, I'm just saying, like, colonization was a good thing. So who is April Ryan? Who is this person we speak of? Let's see here. I have a video for those of you who may have forgotten. And it goes a little something like this.
So, Mr. President, if it's Mr. President, just wait this moment. If it's unfair to the country and it's costing millions of dollars, why don't you just
give him the mic, please? I've answered the question. Okay. Go ahead, take the. Well, I'll give you voters. I will give you voter suppression. You just have to sit down, please. Sit down. I didn't call you. I'll give you voter suppression. Take a look at the CNN polls, how inaccurate they were. That's called voter suppression. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I'm not responding. I'm responding to. Excuse me. I'm not responding to you. I'm talking to this gentleman. Would you please sit down? Excuse me. Would you please sit down? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Moment from November of 2018. April Ryan, you write in the book, in just a few curt words, the president attempted to take away my voice and negate my lived history. I wish I could say that this was a unique incident, but that interaction played out over the course of that president's administration with both him and a parade of press secretaries.
Yeah, and I want to be very honest. I hate listening. Hate is a strong word, but I hate listening to that because I was off mic, and I'm so glad you played it in its entirety. I was off mic, and I said, Mr. President, voting rights. I was like 2 or 3 rows in. And he heard me. He responded. When a president responds out of respect for the office, you stand up. And I did that. He responded. And then he proceeds to tell me to sit down. And he was screaming voter fraud, and there was voter suppression. And I kept asking about the irony of all of this, right? And then 4 years later, I get a question from Joe Biden. I don't even think Joe Biden even knew it was 4 years later. But 4 years later, my first question in the White House press conference with this president happened to be 4 years to the moment of when Donald Trump did that. It was surreal. It was irony. It was a lot for me in that moment to see what happened 4 years ago juxtaposed to what happened a few weeks ago. But it was a horrible moment for me, but for the nation and for that president. He and I will always be remembered for that. And that's not what you want to think of when you think of an American president or the press. He had disdain for me, but he answered my question off mic. I gave him respect by standing up. And as a Black woman, to tell a Black woman who is a mother, who people listen to sit down, it was insulting, but I was not going to sit down because he responded. It showed who he was in that moment.
So Blanche, it seems to me that she was the one who was being disruptive and a nuisance in that press conference. Trump told her to sit down, and rightly so. And then here she is all these years later trying to flip it around and pretend as if she's a victim. What say you?
I say sit down. I'm nicer than Trump. He's nicer than me because I would have said get her out of here. But I'm gonna just say this, right? And this is what I mean with that kind of attitude. Like this is that can't be challenged, Black girl, magic queen. Like this is that whole thing where just because you stand up, we all have to stop and listen to you. Just because you have an opinion, it has to be heard. Like, and again, this is a culture, and Trump did right by telling her to be quiet because he probably acknowledged her, thinking she was going to say something that was legitimate, and then she started probably talking about slavery and cotton fields. He said, "Sit down, sit down, sit down." So, yeah, he was right in telling her to be quiet, but like you're saying, she's a victim all these years later and acting like that was the worst moment of her. If that was the worst moment of your life, Trump telling you to sit down and be quiet, then it's over. I'm sorry.
Keisha, your thoughts?
April Ryan has probably never been around a strong man because she should have recognized when a strong man, she would not have even tried him like that, as we say. She would have been, you don't disrespect, you don't disrespect the president. And you know better when you've been around strong men, when well, first of all, you just don't disrespect people, and you certainly don't disrespect a president of the United States. But I don't think she's ever really I think that's why she felt so hurt by it, because it was like, oh my God, like how dare this, a man talking to me that way. It's like, yeah, that's what men do. Yeah, when you're out of pocket, yeah, men are gonna say, he said, please. He said, sit down, please.
Yeah, he did say,
sit down,
please.
And I think that, my dad, my father, very strong man. He would have definitely, if I was out of line, he would have definitely told me to sit my behind down. Absolutely. And then guess what I would have did? Sat down.
So speaking of strong man, and after this check,
hold on, Chad.
Go ahead.
Chad, this thing says that at an April 2018 White House press conference, Ryan asked whether or not Trump has considered resigning, which drew the ire of White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who called Ryan's question absolutely ridiculous. Ryan said she subsequently received death threats and hired a bodyguard. What? Come on, man.
But that's the thing. Man. I always hear about these alleged death threats, and I wonder how real they actually are. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wonder, like, oh, I received death threats. That's easy to say, but like, can you? I don't know. Like, what kind of person is like? First of all, how do they even have your information enough to even send you the death threat to where it can get to you, for one.
Right.
And then two, it's like, what are they saying? I wish you were dead, or I want to come and kill you, or whatever the case may be. Like, how exactly does that work? Where a person is getting a death threat? Because I spend time on, social media or what have you. I say some things that some people might find provocative. I mean, I get some silly comments and DMs every now and then, but nobody's ever threatened my life. I don't know about you guys, but that's never happened to me. So
I have.
It has? Okay. So death threats are real. Okay. I stand corrected. Do you get them all the time? Or like, how does that work, Keisha?
Not as much anymore, but in the beginning, first started about this stuff, I did. I actually, and then when I ran the Black Voices for Trump office here, this Black man, he lunged at me because he saw my T-shirt that said Black Voices for Trump. I mean, that is how his elderly, I don't know, mother or
He's probably
an
on
elderly
crack.
woman was sitting next. I'm sorry?
He was probably on crack.
No, he was just, it was like Trump derangement syndrome because he saw the shirt and I could tell as soon as he read the last line Trump, it was like something came over him. It was like he was possessed and he just lunged at me and he started saying all these, I can't even repeat the things that he was saying. And it was his elderly mother and like a young little of like 14, 15 young boy was there. He was in total disregard of them.
He just saw
and
red.
all he saw was just like rage. And then online death threats I've had, and most of the time they're from Black people, and wishing that I would be sexually assaulted by white men. I have had some crazy things.
Well, that actually does make sense to me. That does make sense to me because I do get like a lot of DMs from people that I don't even read. So I would venture to say that if I went through and read them, I might see somebody threatening my life. But it is what it is. Yeah. So here's the next video that I have in queue, and I want to get Chuck's response to this particular video. It's kind of long, but I probably won't play the whole thing. It's about 3 minutes long. I'm going to cut it a little short.
April Ryan is no stranger to C-SPAN viewers, a veteran White House correspondent with well over 100 videos in the C-SPAN video library, and as of October, the author of her latest book, Black Women Will Save the World, an Anthem. April Ryan, it's a book that opens with then Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's nomination on February 25th, 2022 to the Supreme Court. Why start this book there?
Why start this book there? Because exactly what the title signifies. Black women are saving the world. And we are now in perches that no one has ever imagined. Shirley Chisholm said, being Black and a woman in this country is a double whammy. And we've seen that over the centuries. But now look at where Black women are stationed and positioned in this nation. And to be at the United States Supreme Court, something that was elusive to us for centuries, we're now there. It's a historic moment for a woman who shows up truly as a Black woman, from her speak, her hair, to just who she is. She's not late Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, but she is Ketanji Brown Jackson, whose opinions people are viewing, watching, and even taking note of. In the first few months, she just stepped on the court in War Road, October 1, and we are listening to her decisions, her opinions, and they're making news. She is significant to history. She's significant to the future of this nation, particularly when it comes to laws. So why start with her? That's why.
Significant to history. You mentioned Shirley Chisholm. Remind viewers who she was and where Black women were in this country during her time.
Well, Shirley Chisholm was the first Black woman to run for president in 1972. She was...
Okay, so y'all get that. Basically, she wrote a book called Black Women Are Going to Save America. She pays homage to Shirley Chisholm, to Ketanji Brown Jackson, and others. Chuck, who was Shirley Chisholm? And and what was her significance to, I guess, I don't want to ask a leading question, but I guess there is no way for me to ask it but to be leading. What was her significance to, I guess, the kind of decadence of Black American politics?
Well, to be fair, I don't know a ton about Shirley Chisholm. Of course, I know who she is. I remember I had a book of stamps with Shirley Chisholm on them. This was a while back before I even knew exactly who she was. I know she's viewed by many modern day leftists, for lack of a better term, to be this sort of feminist icon of sorts. But so like you talked about, I noticed something when she was speaking, and I know the three of you probably caught it as well, because when she talked about the significance of having an African American or a Black American on the court, she went to Thurgood Marshall and she completely leapfrogged Clarence Thomas. You know, they play this game like it's about race and sex and these other things, when of course it's about what's between the person's ears, because if this person is on the so-called ideological right and just so happen to be Black, well, of course they don't count, right? But when she says that Black women are saving the world, I'm going to go back to something that Blanche said earlier. What exactly are Black women saving the world from? What exactly are they attempting to transition America or transition the world into? I'm not entirely sure, but once again, it is more of the same old, where it's, well, remember she referenced Shirley Chisholm, and she brought up something that Shirley Chisholm said with respect to race and sex, about how race and sex is serving as a double whammy for women. And so you have this conjuring up the philosophy of intersectionality, long before it became a commonplace, in the lexicon, when we start to debate American politics today. But it seems to me that, once again, that Black women are taking up the mantle. They are the ones who are taking the standard of communism into battle, because they are part of this new revolutionary vanguard, because of their oppressed bona fides, because of the color of their skin and their reproductive organs. So once again, just more hollow, shallow, deceptive rhetoric that has nothing at all to do with anything substantive. But once again, that's what they do.
Yeah.
And Blanche, I know I'm not trying to piggyback and go back, but I just wanted to harken on one thing Keisha said when she talked about, not having she must have never had a father, or I don't know her marital status or anything like that. She probably has never been around a strong man. When I watched that clip, I kind of had flashbacks of what it was like during those 4 years when President Trump was in office, and just saw how much disdain and disrespect our media had towards him. I had never seen an American president treated like that ever in my life. And when you hear people would accuse Donald Trump of being things like fascist, they would say he was Hitler, they would say he was Mussolini and Joseph Stalin, and make all of these comparisons to these 20th century dictators. And when you use terms like fascism, or when you use terms like Nazi, I guess I'm allowed to say that. When you use those sorts of terms, you are actually referring to something that is tangible. Those words mean something. Sort of like when you were speaking to Dana on her show, and she kept using words like imperialist and colonialist and these other various things. Those words actually mean something. And what they were saying in so many words, and they would refer to President Trump as a fascist, they was simply describing a masculine man. They were describing someone who was manly, a charismatic leader, someone who had strong masculine leadership qualities. Now, does that automatically make him Adolf Hitler? No, it doesn't. Does that automatically make him Benito Mussolini? No, it doesn't, right? because those men followed a very particular ideology. And so that's what we need to be focused in on, not so much Donald Trump's personality, but this is, of course, what liberals feared most. And this is why they always talk about, nationalism. They have you fearing the term, right? Because of, the fallout from World War II and this kind of new emerging neoliberal order feared the very concept of nationalism and the reemergence of a political strongman like a Mussolini or a Hitler. And so this is when you have the whole evisceration of the very concept of the nation state, because, of course, these left-wing ideologues, speaking of the conversation that you had with Dana before when she brought up the UN and this whole notion of human rights, et cetera, these vehicles like the UN, they just, became vehicles of left-wing ideologues to try and do away with the very concept and the very notion of the nation state. So
Yeah,
I just wanted to harken on that too.
No, 100%. And it's this whole game they play where they try to embody all of their hatred for a specific ideology and a person, and then do their darndest to sink that person, their agenda being to sink that ideology with said person. Again, is something that we've seen over the course of the last century. There was a time in history where the majority of the American population were very strongly against communism, and who was at the head of that charge against communism? None other than Joe McCarthy of the Senate, the American Senate. And then the media was able to, in a sense, collectivize themselves and coming out against McCarthy, and they kind of labeled that time as the so-called McCarthy era. Now, of course, I'm speaking for myself on this panel. Everybody has their own opinion, and I respect whatever your opinion is. But just speaking for myself, I denounce this whole McCarthyism kind of like boogeyman. I think the man was a patriot. I think that he was really exposing a lot of the communist influences, not only in American politics, but also in American art. And they were able to sink him, and with him sink this notion that we as Americans must be on our guard against communist influences. The same thing happened with Barry Goldwater in the 1960s and 70s. Here is a man who was one of the most level-headed senators in the Senate. He was very balanced in the way that he approached, his task as a senator. I don't agree with him on everything that he said. I don't agree with him on every vote that he made in the Senate. But when it came to civil rights and other such things, I think he was right on the mark. But of course, again, the media sunk him by calling him an ultra conservative and all these, boogeyman buzzwords. And now the average person who knows about politics, most people don't even know who Goldwater is, but those who do know about politics, you mention the name Goldwater and they think, oh yeah, evil, racist, bigoted senator. And so that brings us to the modern time, the modern hour. You hear the word Trump. Most people who are just kind of unbiased consumers of culture, unbiased consumers of news and what is being peddled through the television screen. These are the media types. They're trying to get you to look at Trump as an evil, mad, fascist dictator. But why? Because he displays masculinity, because he calls the media to account, because he does the things that, or because, in one of his latter State of the Union addresses, he said America will never be a socialist country. So he positioned himself against socialism. Is it for that reason that we're to look at him as disdain, with this kind of disdain? So again, take notice of the fact, and I wish propaganda fluent Layla Gray was here to kind of chime in on this, but take notice of the fact at how the media ever so often will take a worldview, take an ideology, embody that in a single person, and sink that person with the intention of seeking that idea, if that makes sense. Do you, Chuck, or I'm sorry, do you, Blanche or Keisha want to chime in on that point before we move on?
I would love to. So in the Bible, in Matthew chapter 12, verse 29, it says, or how can someone enter a strong man's house and plunder his goods unless he first binds the strong man? Then indeed he may plunder his house. And when you, and that's why, the presence of a male figure, and I was having a debate once with a guy who I was trying to explain to him how no, God is not a person. The spirit God is not a person, but it's a masculine figure. Like he's a masculine. When you reference God, you say he, even though, yes, I do believe that, femininity is embodied in God as well, but he is definitely a man. Like that is a masculine energy. And America has been so, the man has been so dehumanized. It's so, just like when you were saying about, when oh my God, I just lost my train of thought. But when you were talking about, oh, you can call him a Nazi, or you can call him, all of these things. When you're encapsulating a man into like this caricature of what you want people to believe him to be, instead of honoring the strong man that is not, it's needed. It is needed to run a country. It is needed to run a society. He's needed to run a community, and he's needed to run a family. And if we don't have strong men, we see the effects of that. And I was just making notes. I have a couple of notes here. So when it comes to Ketanji Brown Jackson, I was so disgusted, honestly, that this was the woman that we were supposed to uplift and herald and look up to. When this woman was the same woman who was writing all of these papers in college about how we need to go easy on pedophiles. Like, really? Is this the best that you can do? This is the woman that we're going to uplift, and she's going to be, kind of the representative of Black women in the Supreme Court, the woman who uplifts pedophilia? Because in your home, when a strong man is in your home, that ain't happening. Those kind of things, that's not happening when a strong man is in his home. He's going to protect his children. He's going to protect his wife. He's going to protect his family. He's going to protect his community. So things like that don't that's not going to fly. Another thing, do people know that Ketanji Brown Jackson, that her husband is white? I just wonder, do people know that? Do you realize that her husband is white? So, her embodying all of the Blackness and all of this and that.
When she shows up, her hair, her thoughts, everything about it. Like, come on now.
Yes. Well, her husband's white. Okay. Not that I don't care, but I'm just saying. And this whole idea about women saving the world, I'm sorry, Jesus did, like that's Jesus's job, okay, boo. So you don't get to just put somebody else in that spirit of the salvation of the world does not lie in the hands of Black women, or to bust the bubble. But no, that's not okay, and I think it gives Black women this idea that they have some godlike ability that is, to me, it's blasphemy. It's like, no, you do not. You don't have it because you're Black, and you don't have it because you're a woman. And we try to put these characteristics of being Black and a woman and all of these things onto human beings and make Black people this infallible, almost like a Jesus. And it is crazy. And the last thing that I will say is that April Ryan will get up there and say all of the things that are all of the bad things that are happening in the Black community, which is headed by Black women primarily. So it would reason to me that we might be the problem and not the solution. That's all I'm going to say.
No, so that reminds me of something that Blanche was saying on his live today. when he likened it to the Garden of Eden. Like, who did the serpent appear to? Right? He had access to Adam, but who did he go to instead? Blanche, you want to expound on that?
Yeah. Is there static in my voice when I'm talking? Because people are saying in the chat there's some static. I hope
Yeah,
not.
there's
Yeah,
a
it's a
little
little
bit of
static.
static.
It's a little static.
Oh man.
It ain't too bad though.
All right. Yeah. So basically, Satan, he basically approached Black Girl Magic. Um, Satan saw somebody that would, you know, uh, somebody that would agree with him. First of all, let me say this one thing real quick. She said when she was rattling off, when Ryan was rattling off Ketanji's accomplishments, she literally said, and Chad mentioned it, she said her speech, her hair, her opinions. Like, that qualified her to be a Supreme Court justice. Like, this is absolute. And then she even said, and she wore a robe. Like, what else is she going to do? She's supposed to wear a robe. It's just crazy how, again, this is like, and this is what I talk about. Imagine winning a Super Bowl and never going to practice. This is what I see them doing with Black women. They literally are like promoting them to a level and it's not even earned. And listen, I'm not saying that Black women aren't great. I know a lot of great Black women. I'm just saying they're great because they actually did something, not just because they're Black. And so to me, when I talked about Eve, if you think about it, Eve wanted to be like God. Think about it, because when Satan went to her, she knew what God had said, so she wasn't in the dark about what God had said. And then she looked at the tree, she examined it, she saw it was good, it was beautiful, and it even said that she saw would make her wise. So Eve already had this kind of complex anyway to even want to kind of be like God. And then it says that once she ate the fruit, she gave it to Adam because he was right there. So again, I feel like this plays out in the Black community where it's the women leading and the women have the fruit, and a lot of our men are, biting that fruit. But yeah, I agree with all three of you though.
Can I say one thing before
Yeah.
you jump back, Chad?
Yeah.
I'm gonna be really quick. I promise you. Yeah. So Keisha said something. I think she said something about it seems like there's like a war against like strong men. And of course that's true, right? But when you get past that, Chad, is something that you've been talking about for a long time now, and of course that the war is against God. Of course, some of you may be familiar with Whitaker Chambers.
Mm-hmm.
I know Chad probably is familiar with Whitaker Chambers, but one of his most famous quotes, when I think he was testifying, I think it was before Congress, it may have been, but one of his most famous quotes is that he was a communist or whatever who had defected, and well, you are familiar with the story of Whitaker Chambers. But anyway, the quote was that the problem with communism or communists is that they are repeating or they have repeated the original mistake that was done by the first man, something to that effect. And what he was talking about was, of course, Adam believing that he could be like God, or allowing himself to be deceived by his helpmeet Eve, that they could both be like God. And also Karl Marx once said, and then Vladimir Lenin, of course, would take that quote and he would often say it when he would be engaging in his screeds against the church. But Karl Marx once infamously said that communism begins where atheism begins. You cannot separate the two.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was actually listening to Blanchett's live today. I was listening to it because I was driving. I wasn't able to watch it, but so one of the things that I gleaned from what he was saying, one of the things that I realized, because he did so what Blanche did is he held Tory Lanez and Andrew Tate to account. Two things can be true at once. It can be true that Tory Lanez didn't actually shoot Meg the Bronco, right?
The male horse.
Yeah, the stallion. So it could very well be true.
Yeah, the stallion is a male horse. Quite apt, considering all the transgender nonsense that's going on right now. I know I'm not saying she's a man, but that's just I get it because the stallion is like she, her body, so it's like she's built like a horse. But technically, a stallion is a male horse they use okay. It's a breeding horse. I'm just saying, yeah. All right, go ahead.
No. So it could very well be true that he didn't actually shoot her, right? However, the fact of the matter is, when you look at the lyrics of his music, when you look at the kind of lifestyle that he's promoting, it's a degenerate lifestyle. It's a decadent lifestyle. It's something that should be denounced. The same is true with Andrew Tate. There's a lot that Andrew Tate says that I agree with. I even posted something that he said today that I agree with on IG. But when it comes to some of the weird, crazy sex stuff that he's into, and when it comes to the fact that for Andrew Tate, the amount of women that you're able to get that are a 10 or whatever, being the thing that he longs for or is measuring as a means of status, again, is decadent, it's degenerate, and it should be denounced, right? So you can agree with certain things that he's saying, while at the same time denouncing the kind of lifestyle that he's promoting. So two things can be true at once. But what I took from what Blanche was saying is that what we have allowed to happen over the past century is we've allowed the feminist types to build a straw man of what they think masculinity is, because it's easier to destroy straw men than it is to destroy that which is tangible, that which is substantive. When you look at the black man from the early to mid 20th century, he was present. He was at home with his family. He was entrepreneurial. He was a Christian, right? He was a biblical minded man. Not all of them, but many of them were. And in fact, that was a man to emulate, especially in the South. That was a black man to emulate. But what the feminists said of that man, especially people like Shirley Chisholm, people like Nikki Giovanni and others, is that he's a wife beater. He's a Color Purple kind of man. He's Mr. from the Color Purple. That was the kind of man that these people built a straw man out of. And that man was easy to attack. And so, unfortunately, what happened is a lot of men began to identify with that straw man versus what they actually witnessed their fathers and grandfathers doing. And they said, I don't want to be like that. And so, again, I don't want to get into the psychology of it all, but this is the kind of thing that happens where you're constantly being beaten over the head. And they tried to do it again with the Gillette commercial, the toxic masculinity, where they take something as universally true as this concept of boys will be boys. Now, typically when we say that, what we mean is, if brothers are picking on each other or they're trying to flex or do all the things that, my two, 8 and 9-year-old son do, I'm going to say, well, boys will be boys. Of course, I'm going to correct them and I'm going to guide them and foster them to the best of my ability. But at the same time, there's certain things that you have grace for because, again, boys will be boys, right? But they're trying to take that and so construe it as if to say that we must, in a sense, feminize our boys so as to not, because, them fighting each other can very well turn into them being, serial rapists when they're in their 20s. And so these are the kind of things that they spin to push their narrative. They build these straw men, and rather than going with our like what we know to be true, we try to the best of our ability to distance ourselves from what they're denouncing, so we're not guilty of being the kind of person or thing that they say is wrong in their religion, right? Because in every religion, you have the righteous, you have the unrighteous, you have the good, you have the evil, you have the right, you have the wrong. And because they have the upper hand in terms of the media, in terms of academia, in terms of education, so on and so forth, they, in a sense, get to push their religion through all of these kind of public aspects of society. And so they get to set the standard for what is right and what is wrong. And rather than as Christians saying, well, I don't go by your standard of what's right and wrong, I go by what God's standard is, we acquiesce to their standards and we try to get away from what God says is right and cling instead to what they say is right. hopefully all that made sense, because it just literally came to me as I'm thinking about what we're saying right not juxtaposed, but in addition to what Blanche was saying earlier. So I want to play the latter half of this clip where she talks about who was really at the head of the Black Panther Party in the 1970s. So if I can get to that.
It's gonna be interesting. Yeah. Tuned in now. I'm a Black Panther.
Take a wild guess.
Well, Shirley Chisholm was the first Black woman. She was a feminist. She was ahead of her time. She was about LGBTQ plus rights. She was about so much to uplift women, uplift the community. And at the end of the day, she made a mark. Before there was Kamala Harris, before there was Carol Moseley Braun, there was Shirley Chisholm, and her words reverberate. And there's another quote that she said. I love using her quotes because she was such a profound and prolific person, not just politician, but person who understood humanity. She said, if you don't have a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. Black women and Black people have perpetually had a folding chair, an invisible folding chair on their backs for so long. But now, since 1972, since she said those words, Black people, particularly Black women, not only have that perpetual seat, the invisible folding chair on their backs, but they're also sitting people at the tables, convening the tables, and bringing permanent seats for others to sit in. So times have changed, and she made such a ripple in this nation for people to remember her over 50 years later. The city of Brooklyn, the borough of Brooklyn, and the city of New York, that seat.
Viewers, who she was.
Okay, well, I guess the Black Panther thing wasn't in there, but I may have not included it. But she said something to the effect of like, when people think of the Black Panther Party, they think of people like Huey P. Newton and H. Rap Brown and others. But really, only 30% of the Black Panther Party were men, 70% were women, and they strategically put these kind of male figureheads as the perspective head of the organization, so as to make you think it was a masculine organization, but really there was a lot of feminine energy therein. So
that is
Chuck,
true.
your thoughts?
Well, it's true that there was a lot of feminine energy in the Black Panther Party movement, because collectivism is feminine in nature.
Yeah.
But anywho, yeah, I did an entire. I'm not trying to plug myself or anything like that, but I just did a couple of months ago. I did a two-part breakdown where I sort of went into how the Black Power movement that was spearheaded by the Black Panther Party did a huge deal in terms of bringing in the era of what became known as Black feminism. Huey P. Newton, of course, he was famously a so-called ally of the gay liberation movement. This is a known fact that, Huey P. Newton once infamously said that perhaps not only can a homosexual be a revolutionary, because there were all sorts of questions with respect to the gay liberationist movement and where they fit in, and with all of these subversive activities that was going on back in the 1970s. And Huey P. Newton once infamously said during a speech, I believe it was 1972, I'm not sure off the top of my head, but he said that not only can a homosexual be a revolutionary, but perhaps a homosexual is the most revolutionary. And that is a quote. And he chided his Black brothers for not being accepting of the women's rights movement and the gay liberation movement, because perhaps they view the women's rights movements, like, particularly the Black feminist movement and the gay liberation movement, perhaps they did not want to incorporate those movements into the consolidated or amalgamated leftist vanguard, because perhaps they had some internal conflicts that they were dealing with. Maybe perhaps they were questioning their own sexuality and these sorts of things. And so Yeah, and you know, and then, well, you know, of course, even if you read the autobiographical information of none other than Elaine Brown herself, who of course headed up the Black Panther Party at Huey P. Newton's behest when he was in exile in Cuba, because there was suspicion that he, in fact, had murdered an 18-year-old prostitute. Elaine Brown herself said in her own book that there was all manner of abuse and violence being carried out against black women who were a part of like we said, you know, what kind of a man would go out, and of course, you know, Eldridge Cleaver, he was, you know, an admitted rapist. He talked about this openly. He raped black women. He liked to rape black women because he viewed them as the most vulnerable. And then and this is another quote from Eldridge Cleaver, once he honed his skills, he began to move on to white women. Once he honed his skills as a rapist. But you know, Eldridge Cleaver talked about, you know, the power of the PUSSY, and that if a woman wanted help the revolution, she should withdraw sex from men who weren't in fact on the front lines of the Black Power struggle, because of course those weren't real men. But it was because of the marginalization that took place within the so-called Black Power movement that black women felt the need to really push for their own specific movement. And then this is when the likes of, Elaine Brown and Angela Davis and Alice Walker, the woman who wrote The Color Purple, really began to, and Bell Hooks, and you are familiar with the usual suspects, right? So, yeah, the Black Panther Party was a bane on society, a very evil, destructive, despicable organization.
And what's funny is that in in this interview, she ran the same talking point that these type of people always run, which is, oh, the reason we have SNAP is because the Black Panther Party had a free breakfast program for kids, and so that's why that we have SNAP today, as though it's something to be proud of, you know. And the fact is, when you look at SNAP and all of these other government programs, which does virtue at the expense of the American taxpayer, which isn't virtue at all. That's nothing to be proud of at all, especially in a country that was supposed to be a constitutional republic and not a socialist, communist cesspool. So I wanted to play this clip. It was from a caller who agreed with April Ryan, and I want to get your thoughts on that. On this particular clip, Blanche and Keisha.
You write in this book that it's time to bring black women into American folklore. What does that mean?
Yeah. We're left out. We just really started embracing who Harriet Tubman was, understanding that, our history books, may have given a paragraph or two, but to understand who she was, and this Black woman who didn't have a place, a slave in this nation, and she kept coming back to free Black people who were enslaved in this nation, particularly Africans or descendants of Africans, because she had a dis-ease in her spirit, understanding there was freedom and something better. She kept going back, taking the profit off the land, and she was wanted. That's one of the stories, the many stories. Let's talk about the Black Panther Party, which was vilified back in the day. But now we salute them because they talked about community and love for the community and uplifting the community. They talked about sickle cell, which we're still looking for a cure for, but it was a very big push that made people aware of it. Also,
okay, so this is actually the clip I was referring to. This isn't the Black female caller, but she does mention Harriet Tubman, which I want Blanche to respond to, and she mentions the Black women being at the head of the Black Panther Party, which I want Keisha and Chuck to respond to. But I'm going to continue playing it. There's about a minute and a half left in this clip.
So the Black Panther Party talked about the issue of free breakfast for our children. The government now is funding free breakfasts and lunches for our kids. And then also clinics in the community for healthcare. What are we doing funding clinics? But I bring up the Black Panther Party because the picture, the optics of it were Black men. But 70% of that party were women. And they said they did it. They did it out of love for the community. They pushed because of love for the community. So it's time for Black women to get their due. We have been lifting and serving for a long time, and people really don't know the truth and understand what it takes to lead like this. And they really haven't really heard the stories in mass about who Black women have been, who they are, and who they will be in the future in this nation.
You described the book as an anthem.
Yeah.
What's an anthem, and why is this an anthem?
Well, if you're in the Black church, you know what an anthem is. You sing it over and over again. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to say this over and over again. Black women will save the world. We haven't just said we're going to save the world. We have been saving the world. And it's just intrinsic to our nature. And talking to a friend, Cornell Belcher, who is the head of Brilliant Corners, Democratic pollster, he said, when Black women serve, when Black women go to serve, it's about love for community uplift versus our male counterparts. A lot of times it's about power and ego. And just in this last election cycle, according to Win with Black Women, over 500 Black women were on the ballot in 44 states across this nation. Unheard of, right? Times are changing. Black women are finding their voice. They are saving the world. They have saved the world. Just sit back and let's celebrate it and not ignore it, because Black women welcome everyone. We celebrate everyone, but we never take time to pause and reflect and say, hey, let's celebrate us. So I'm giving us that pause to say, look, you're historic. You've done some mighty work. And let's look at this moment, because we've never been here before.
Lord have mercy.
I ain't saying nothing.
It reminded me of something that you said earlier, Keisha. But Blanche, what are your thoughts about what you just watched?
First of all, Black women are celebrated for just being Black. Like, there's no real, it's just, think about it. I remember one time I did a video and I asked, can any other race of woman be a queen? And it was a literal debate on they basically said that white women, Hispanic women, and Asian women can't be queens. I said, okay, so what's the qualification for Black women being queens? Oh, we were born queens. So again, this is entitlement. This is, again, winning the Super Bowl without going to practice. What she said was a bunch of, first of all, Harriet Tubman, right? If anybody has the time, just go look at what Harriet Tubman did, and it's almost equivalent to Superman. I'm not joking. like the stuff they said she did is literally equivalent to what a superhero could do. I'm talking about hauling logs, leading troops into battles, being a spy, being a nurse. Falling asleep at a moment's notice, but able to free slaves and not fall asleep at a moment's notice. Like,
you ain't buying it, huh, Blanche?
Listen, man. And then if you really dig into it, you'll find she didn't save, quote unquote, 1,000 slaves. She went back and got the people that she knew. The whole story is really, listen, man, it's a lot to it. But to what she was saying, though, again, Black women are recognized. We're not going to say that. We're not going to say that Black women are recognized, because literally Black women are in every facet of society and praised. You can't name one outlet that portrays Black women in a negative light. Not one. They all uplift Black women. I don't care, Fox, CNN, Shape, whatever you pick, they uplift it. And then if a Black woman does something bad, it's on a post somewhere quiet and everybody's crying, saying she must have been stressed out and all this. But anyway, I can go on for days about that. But I would just say, to me, it's just entitlement. And it's the same thing they're going to do with the trans community, where you put these people above everybody else. So because you're trans, you're special. because you're a black woman, you're special. Because you're this, you're special. And so, yeah.
Keisha.
Okay, so if you look at a lot of these black liberation feminist women, a lot of them were gay. They were lesbians and they hated men. Okay, they wanted nothing to do with men. They might have had like one bad experience with a guy, and then all the men were totally terrible. So I think that's why they always try to pull near to the LGBTQ, because a lot of them were lesbians, like Alice Walker. If you like, we used to laugh, and pretty much everybody can quote like parts of The Color Purple. But when I watched that movie, like as an adult, I was like, oh my God, this is a terrible movie. Like, this is awful. Like, there were parts that were funny, but when you go back and look at it, how Black men were portrayed, how men in general were portrayed in the movie was terrible. It was an awful movie. And when I started bringing this up to like older people that I knew, and there was actually an uproar in the Black community about The Color Purple because it portrayed Black men so terribly. But I just wanted to show people, you always see currently, this idea of, Black women and their love for the LGBTQ. And I think that is the connector, because those early Black feminists were gay. And so they became bedfellows, I guess. This idea of we're going to, I want this to be an anthem. I think we need to be really careful about really understand what she's trying to say. She's not just saying, oh, we're just going to repeat this. She's trying to indoctrinate in the, it's almost like a hypnotic thing that she's trying to do, or what they're trying to do, push behind this idea that it can't just be the title of a book. It's going to be something that is going to be repeated over and over and over again, going into that spiritual mindset, just like the whole BLM thing, when they were that whole say their name, that idea of calling on the names of dead people is a conjuring up of spirits.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get too all, into the weeds on that, but
Black magic.
This, saying something over and over and over again it's a type of brainwashing. And, this my last point, this idea of like, oh, Black women, it's just going to be just such great sisterhood, and we just love each other, and everything's all great and wonderful. I remember I was a competitive cheerleader when I was growing up. I was a cheerleader from like 5 years old all the way to like graduating high school and a little bit of college. Whenever we had, and this was the sentiment amongst all the Black cheerleaders that I knew, whenever we had a Black judge, we were like, oh, great. Because we knew that basically no matter how great we performed, they were still going to find something that you didn't do so well. And I even know other women, when you have Black women that are managers that you have to work with, or this idea, look at Kamala Harris, she ain't even all Black and she can't keep a staff. Because I'm sorry, but I think it's like an ego thing. It's like, I don't know what exactly it is. First of all, I think, like Blanche was saying, this entitlement thing is like, yes, I'm here, you have to do what I say, and all of this thing. That spirit, that this entitlement spirit, this overruling spirit, it's not welcoming to other people, and unfortunately, many Black women they're just very hard to get along with. In high school, it was hell for me in high school because like the Black women, they hated me. When I tell you they hated me. I didn't
even know Black people lived in Connecticut, to be honest with you.
You're so funny. We do. Thank you very much. Ask Candace Owens. Candace is from Connecticut too. Thank you very much. There's not many of us, but we were there. Okay. But I just remember crying to my mother, like, why don't I have any friends? Like, none of the Black girls liked me. Like, well, I had friends, but none of them were Black. I had a very bad idea of Black women. I was terrified of Black women at one point. My mom was like, okay, you're going to go to a historically Black college because you need to experience some other things. But it was not a good experience for me growing up. And I didn't always live in Connecticut. So my family lived in the South up until I was 13. And then we moved to Connecticut.
Okay,
so,
gotcha.
but I don't care what part of the country that I was in, my experience with other Black girls was terrible. And so I don't know what April is talking about, this whole idea of like, yes, it's just
We accept
twinkles and
everybody. Okay.
sunshines.
Do you?
It's like not it wasn't my experience. Now,
Yeah.
did it get better? Like as I got older, did I find, friends and things, some of them who happen to be Black? Yes. But growing up and working under, like Black women who were managers was not a good experience for me.
Yeah.
And so good luck, April, with that, because I don't know. I feel like she lives in just like this fantasy world. Like I'm like, where do you live? And like who are these people that you're around
Yeah.
where this is your experience? Because I literally do not know anybody else who experiences that. Not saying that all Black women are bad. I'm not saying that at all, but I don't know. It's like she lives in a whole other reality that I am just not aware of.
Yeah, it's definitely delusional. I mean, this whole concept of like Black women, like they just accept everybody. Is like how, like where? I've never seen that happen before. I mean, I grew up with sisters. Like I can tell you, Black women don't accept everybody. Like nobody accepts everybody. Like everybody, But go ahead, Blanche.
Well, I was going to ask Keisha a question. Keisha, do you think that the Black girls weren't liking you because you were probably more well-spoken, maybe more polished, more refined, more not indulging in ratchetness? I'm wondering what was the reason.
Yeah, man, she act
Well,
white.
it's funny that you
That's what they would say.
my mother was a stickler for proper grammar.
Grammar,
Right?
I know.
I'm talking about even when we were little kids. So this is not because, you grew up around white folks. No, my mother, she's just like that. Like that's how she is. So whenever I opened my mouth, I literally could feel the room like, like, what? Like, wait a minute. And when you're trying to find yourself as a young woman and you're growing up, it doesn't matter what color you are. Like all girls, everybody does that. You have you're growing up. You're trying to figure out, okay, who am I, and all these things. And it hurt my feelings because why y'all making me talk about this? But it was a trying time for me because I just didn't feel like I could fit in. I wasn't Black enough for the Black girls. You know what I mean? And it was like, and I didn't know any other way to be. If I would have come home talking crazy, my mother would have. There was punishment that came with that. Like I wasn't trying to put on, but that's what they thought. They always thought like, oh, she's trying to talk like a white girl. Oh, she wants to be this. Oh, she wants to be that. And it was never any of that. That's just how we were raised. And it was really tough. It was really, really tough. And I thought that all Black girls were like that. I just thought that if you, spoke with good English, if you did not, my mom did not play, going out and just being, I couldn't go and hang out, and do all this. That was not happening. Like, I just could not be that kind of girl. So, it was rough.
Before I pass it to Chuck, I just want to make a comment about something that you just said, Keisha, which is like what I'm picking up on as you're speaking is the culture that was expected of you at school was very different and very foreign to what your parents expected from you at home. So there was this competing kind of cultural tug of war, that which the school expected, that which your parents expected. And this is the dilemma that many parents find themselves in today. And this is why I'm against the public school system, because the public school systems are this cesspool where you have a lot of these kids in one place with undeveloped and underdeveloped prefrontal cortexes. They are like sponges to this kind of darkening culture that wishes to demoralize you, to make you a statist, as somebody in this panel mentioned earlier. I think it was Chuck. It was you actually too. That's the goal, and it's just not a very good environment to come up in. Candace Owens said that if you are in a public school system and you're making a 4.0 GPA, you're actively learning your history wrong. You're actively being educated wrong. You're being miseducated. And, you know, she was so right. And basically explaining what our public school system is. And so for me, I challenge parents, do think twice about whether or not you want to send your kids to a public school, because you will have to contend with a culture that not only disagrees with your values, but hates your values. And so for me, that's why I made the conscious decision to homeschool my children, because it's like, you know, I want to teach them about the world. I want to teach them about, you know, all the things I don't believe, like Darwinian evolution and all, you know, all the things that gives rise to leftist worldviews and leftist ideology. I want to make them aware of those things, but within the proper context. Right? I want to instill in my children my values, my virtues, not only because it's something I want to do, but that's something that I'm obligated to do and instructed to do by God, who says, teach these things to your children and to your children's children. And so it's incumbent upon me as their dad to instill in them proper values. It'd be foolish for me to have my values, but yet pump that responsibility to the school, where, again, they're being influenced negatively by their peers to rebel against mom and dad. But Chuck, you had something you wanted to say.
You ain't black and right. That's what happened.
Exactly.
Yeah. So just a couple of things. I want to read something to you guys, and I'll reveal who this is and where this is coming from once I'm done. Because you guys brought up language, and I just so happen to have a book right here next to me that I knew I could pull this from real quick. So this author says, this so-called scholar, this intellectual says that, speaking about Ebonics or Black English, they say, Black English captures the beautiful cadences, sensuous tones, kinetic rhythms, forensic articulations, and idiosyncrasies of expression that form the Black vernacular voice. Black grammar does not Black English make. It is a rhetorical practice laden with complex and technical rules. For instance, the use in Black English of zero copulas or forms of the verb to be. To say I am going is one thing, suggesting a present activity, but to say I be going in Black English is something else, suggesting a habitual practice, a repeated action. Black English grows out of the fierce linguisticality of Black existence. The insistence by Blacks of carving a speech of their own from the remnants of African languages and piercing and stitching those remnants together in the new world with extant patterns of English for the purpose of communication and survival. Now, my head is down, part of the top of my head, and I'm peering up. It got to be Michael Eric Dyson, right? This is Michael Eric Dyson.
It has to be. It has to be.
I wrote it.
It has to be.
I knew it.
This is Michael Eric Dyson for the win. So there he is making an excuse. So mind you, the people who go and they talk, they used to call it jive, now we call it slang, whatever, Black English, ebony phonics, they try to, call it in the 90s. Dumb folks, they couldn't even comprehend what sort of like Chad, we talked about it before, Chad, and I've heard you talk about how these they aren't so-called intellectuals. They are intellectuals in the strictest sense of the word, because I like the way Tom Sowell defines an intellectual as simply a person that
Yeah, it's a
specializes in the
profession.
production of ideas. Right? So that's simple. Doesn't mean that they're intelligent, but if they specialize in the production of ideas, then they are hence an intellectual. They wouldn't be able to understand. But see how Michael Eric Dyson, he circles the wagons around that which is dysfunctional, and he gives it this semblance or this scintilla of credibility, right? This kind of dysfunction, because if a man like Michael Eric Dyson is making an excuse for why blacks can't learn to speak the language properly, well then why should we? But Keisha was talking about Alice Walker, and she was right when she talked about how at the time, and some people may not remember, I was extremely young, but there was a lot of backlash toward the film The Color Purple, and the way it depicted black men and the way it depicted black culture. And a lot of people were upset, not just at Steven Spielberg, but they were also upset at Alice Walker. But of course, that begs the question, well, who is Alice Walker? Who is this woman and who influenced her, in fact? And just to let the viewing audience know, if they aren't aware, that Alice Walker is a protege of none other than Howard Zinn.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of people probably are familiar with Howard Zinn. She met Howard Zinn at when she was attending Spelman College. That's right. And I just so happened to pull it up because this is one of my resources, one of the articles that I have archived on my computer here. Because when Howard Zinn passed away in 2010, she actually wrote an article for the Boston Globe titled "Saying Goodbye to My Friend Howard Zinn." Now, this is Alice Walker. I met Howard Zinn in 1961, my first year at Spelman College in Atlanta. He was tall, rangy, good-looking professor that many of the girls at Spelman swooned over. Now, according to some, it's not necessarily a huge secret, but of course he was dismissed from Spelman for all sorts of behavioral impropriety because it was rumored that he was having, sex with his students and so on and so forth. But I just want to go to Alice Walker and something that she said in this sort of goodbye letter to Howard Zinn. She says, and she's speaking about her experience when she took a trip to the Soviet Union. Just so people know the kind of people who these are the people who produce these products, these books, these films, etc. But she says of her visit to the Soviet Union, one way it did play out was the very next summer. I was on my way to the Soviet Union to see how white those folks were and to tell as many of them as I could, even if they were white, that I did not agree with my notions of bombing them. So here she is saying she's going to tell the white people of Russia, even though they are white, that she doesn't agree with the United States bombing them. She goes on to say, I didn't have a lot, she says, I didn't see a lot of generals, but children and women and men and old people of both sexes were everywhere. They were usually smiling, offering flowers or vodka. Now, you see the picture that she's trying to paint of what life was like in the Soviet Union. She goes on to say, there was no iron curtain between us, as I had been told to expect by the Georgia media. So she's saying that the American media is telling her, depicting this image of the Soviet Union that she didn't see when she went there. She said there was no iron curtain between us. Now notice, do you see how she's misappropriating the term, the iron curtain? Because of course we know what the iron curtain is about. We're talking about, right? Eastern Europe, Western Europe, right? The Berlin Wall, etc., etc. We know what people mean when they say the Iron Curtain, but she's taking it and trying to say, well, the whites in Russia treated me better than American whites did. And so the Soviet Union or life in Soviet Russia isn't as bad as they say it is. I love to tell the story of how I was so ignorant at the time that I didn't have a clue who folks were queuing up to see in Lenin's tomb. Nor did I even know what the Kremlin was. I also didn't speak a word of Russian. So you can go on, and like I said, if you're interested, you could probably try to pull up that article to see the entire letter she gives, which she fawns over Howard Zinn, another man who, aside from probably John Dewey, probably maybe second or third in line, who did did the most damage to our educational system, particularly how we approach the study of history. But one more thing, and I'm gonna pass it back, You know, when we talk about like black women and feminism and this whole sort of thing, of course, what they are attempting to do is that they are attempting to make debauchery the norm, right? Remember, Marx, before Marx was a philosopher, Karl Marx was a very passionate playwright and poet. If anyone is really interested, I know we hear a lot about the Communist Manifesto. Even people go a little bit further down the trough and they study Das Kapital. But if you really, really want to know the mind of Marx, it's a good idea to read his poems, his plays, and the letters that he wrote to Engels and his mother and his father to really understand the man that is Karl Marx. But one of the works that he idolized and he loved the most was, of course, Goethe's Faust. And it is said that Karl Marx pretty much knew Goethe's Faust by heart, particularly the lines that were said in the play by Mephistopheles, which is, of course, the devil. And in Goethe's Faust, Mephistopheles says that everything that exists deserves to perish. And Marx would take that and he would repeat that quite often. But the whole point and reason why I'm saying all of this is that if you make debauchery the norm, then society cannot stand, because a society must have stability in order to function. And if there is no so-called status quo, then how can a society function? The whole point is to make the society so dysfunctional so that it cannot function.
Yep.
And so
100%.
they're using the whole black girl magic, LGBT, all the sexual perversion to topple the society, because, to quote the devil in Faust and later on Marx, everything that exists deserves to perish.
Right. Before I play this next clip, my wife texted me and said, she said, oh, you're the only one homeschooling? Your wife did some too. So shout out to my wife. I guess she's watching right now. She does the majority of the homeschooling while I go out and work, do all the hunting and gathering and all that good stuff. So, shout out to her.
Yeah.
So
Shout out to your wife. Hard job.
Yeah, exactly. I titled this, and she does an amazing job at it too. I titled this clip "Strong Black Woman." So let's see what this one's about.
Thank you, Miss Ryan. I love you. I love the narrative that you're getting out there. I am a Black woman, and we are so always painted as angry Black women. When you go back in history, we were the ones that took care of the babies. We are the ones that took care of the fields, even in slavery. We took care of the families. And yet we want to be painted as angry. We're hurt because we are the ones carrying the burden, but then we're the ones that get put down. And I love Sojourner Truth, ain't I a woman? And I need people to understand that we are the ones who care. We have been taught to forgive. We've been taught to hold the family together, even when we've been beat down. So we need the narrative that you are doing. I will definitely get your book. And thank you. And please continue. March on, sister. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn from Baltimore, my home.
So Blanche, we were the ones feeding the children. We were the ones taking care of our husbands. She says this as though this is unique to being a Black woman. It sounds like she's describing a woman. And so when she says, we deserve to be hurt, like, what does she mean?
Again, it goes back to winning the Super Bowl without going to practice. It's just entitlement. If you think about it, what she described is what all women do across the globe. Since the Shadow leave?
No, I'm here.
No, he's still here.
Okay, sorry. It's basically what she described what women have done since the beginning of time. So it's not like uniquely, it's almost like they're painting this picture where they're saying that Black women have a different existence than other women. And if you think about it, what they're really saying is that Black men are the ones that's making this existence, I guess, more difficult or harder. There's a clip that I want to give you, Chad. I want to send it to you. And it's two guys in a room with like some feminists like in the 60s. It's two Black guys and about maybe 3 or 4 Black women. and they're basically talking about feminism, and they're talking about how they want to be, independent, get educated, go to have a career, whatever. And so the guys are complaining, and the guys they say I watched my father go through this, I watched my grandfather go through this, and I watched my great grandfather go through this. So these guys were talking about even back in slavery, they were having to deal with this independent black girl magic throughout their history. And so I was shocked that they were even talking about feminism that far back with black women. But again, like you said, Chad, she's basically saying that if a black woman have to do it, then it's great. If everybody else does it, then it's just, it's nothing. Again, entitlement.
Amazing. What say you, Keisha?
I agree. That everything that she said was what women do. Like, we naturally want to do those things. We naturally want to take care of our home. We naturally want to take care of our husbands. We naturally want to take care of our children. But it's been that natural instinct has been like almost like beaten out of us, not literally, but just mentally. They're trying to rip that. They try to make that like you're being put upon, or it's oppressing to do these things. When in fact, it is men who have made doing those things a lot easier. It is men who have come up with like your refrigerators and dishwashers and the washing machines and all of these inventions. I tell my daughters, I'm like, go whenever anybody tries to downplay men, okay, go show them all of the inventions, even to tampons and like things like that. Men have created these amazing apparatuses, so it makes taking care of our homes easier. And so this idea that we're just so oppressed, it's nonsense. But I mean, there was a time when, and I find this in a lot of different conversations when we talk about Black Americans, there was a time when women had no voice. We were looked at as property. That's true. We couldn't vote. We couldn't. That was true. There was a time, just like there was a time when black people were slaves. It's true. However, we try to make the past current reality, as if we live as if we're still living in those times, to make it an excuse that we need more of the government to come in, or we need more, we need more of these things we try to pretend like we are still going through slavery and Jim Crow, when we're just not. And instead of being grateful of what our ancestors went through, instead of recognizing the greatness that they've done, we diminish it by saying, oh, it's just the same as today. It's no different. There's nothing different. Instead of looking at the accomplishments despite the hardship. That is the victory to me. That is the phenomenon. That it is an amazing victory. And instead of paying attention to those things, it's like, nope. 81% of Black people live middle class, or middle class, but we have to focus on the 19 point whatever percent that are in poverty. Not saying that you don't want those people to do better, but instead of showing them, okay, well, here's what these 81% of people did, so you can come out of this situation, we just focus on the 19% and say that's Black people. That's all we can do. That's the current situation. America has been, terrible for Black people, when in fact, Black Americans are the most successful Black people in the entire world. That is incredible. And so it's dishonest. It is insulting to those Americans, those Black Americans who really did have to struggle to make something of themselves. And now it's almost like This is, I don't know, it's probably a little controversial, I guess, but it's almost like we need to go back a little, like we progressed too much because we don't know what struggle is. And Frederick Douglass says, without struggle, there is no progress. And we can clearly see that. The Bible says, if a man doesn't work, he doesn't eat. There are so many universal laws and principles that we can see that you need some struggle to kick the tires on yourself to see like what you're made of. And all of this doom and gloom of, oh, black women, you know, we're so put upon, we're so oppressed, we have no rights, we have no say. It's crazy. That's what I'm saying. I don't understand like what world you live in. You're talking about how you vacation in Martha's Vineyard with like the president and, you know, like all this stuff. It's like, what reality are you living in? It doesn't make any sense. It's just, it is a delusion. Like it is the clinical definition of delusion. It is a fixed, false belief in something that is not real. They are literally in a delusion.
No, so one of the things that Layla Gray, who was supposed to be on the night, but she was having trouble connecting, but one of the things that she says, which I think is spot on, is that when it comes to leftists and when it comes to the Democrat Party, what they tend to do is they make it look like or seem like your situation is unique, your struggle is unique, and because your struggle is so unique, you need us to come in and fix everything for you. And one of the points that Layla makes is that like one of the things that the Democrats and the leftists appeal to is the kind of degenerate impulses of humanity. They make it appear as if it's this kind of injustice that you have to work for a living, that you have to basically go out and scratch the earth to put bread on the table, that's some kind of injustice, like you've been had upon. And for that reason, you need us to come in and to fix everything for you, because nobody should have to work. Everybody should be able to Blanche's point, because you breathe air, because you have, you know, a certain skin complexion, everything's supposed to be laid out for you. And that's what they appeal to. And it's for that reason. Again, Cato Institute did a study 2 years ago where they polled people and asked them which political philosophy or political economy do you prefer, socialism or capitalism? And black people were the only ethnic group in the country that had a majority favorable view of socialism over capitalism. And so in my personal opinion, I think this is due to this kind of messaging that was perpetuated to black folks as a result of the civil rights movement, where we moved, and I make this point all the time, we've shifted from a trying race to a crying race. The civil rights movement taught us how to cry. The civil rights movement taught us how to beg and how to demand that the government do something for us. It shifted the role of the so-called Negro pastor, where he moved from teaching and preaching the gospel to becoming a political activist. Now you have your Reverend Al Sharpton and your Reverend Jesse Jackson and so on and so forth. And you have all your Reverend Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton wannabes, the lower caste pastors who do the same types of things. They're just not given the same kind of national recognition as the others, as the professional race hustlers. So they're doing the same thing except at a lower degree. Again, all of their congregants are being fed the same kind of notion that that struggling is unique to you because you are black, and as a result, it's an incumbent upon you to use your vote and to use your voice to demand something for or from the government, that he makes life easy for you, that he makes life a walk in the park for you because he owes that to you. And it's a far cry from what you mentioned with regard to what Frederick Douglass said and what the great Booker T. Washington taught in terms of casting down your bucket where you are. Chuck, I'll give you the last word on this before you play the next clip.
Oh, yeah. I just find it ironic when she was saying, April Ryan was talking about all the great stuff that women, black women in particular, have done through, down the centuries or whatever. And then when you compare that or contrast that to what she talked about earlier when she was talking about the Black Panther Party and how the majority of the Black Panther Party membership were women, and how the Black Panthers were able to get the government involved in providing all of these services that were traditionally taken care of by the families, specifically women. It's just like it's just like, okay, so now we have all these social services in place here, thanks to the efforts of these activists that have made the lives of these whiners and complainers easier, so called. It's funny to me how everything that they say always results in, of course, more power for the state. But Keisha was saying, well, why, why, we look at the successes of blacks in this country and how many of us are in the middle class and all the wonderful things that individual black people are doing, which amounts to the so-called black term. By the way, I don't know what a black community is, but anyway, the problem is, and the reason why they continue to harken back on it, of course, is because the results, the outcomes are not equitable. I know you all have probably seen that one clip. It was just going crazy over here. It went viral. This crazy broad Nina Turner, who just lost her mind and was yelling and screaming at people like she didn't have a lick of sense. And she said a line. She said that, I don't know who she was citing, what study, what statistical model she was referencing, but she said that it would take the average African American, I think she said 235 years to catch up to the average white American in terms of wealth. And so therein lies the problem, right? There is no justice until there are equitable outcomes. And so that's why they don't want to see the progress, is because they don't feel like we've made much progress at all, because they continue to say things like, well, the rich keep getting richer and the white people, and so until we are all equal, there is no justice, right? Until there is social justice, there is no justice. But we all know that social justice does not exist. It is a perversion of justice. And that's all I got.
Just a couple more clips. This one. Okay, so we heard a woman agree with April Ryan. Now let's hear a man agree with April Ryan, shall we?
Was it Mitch?
No, it wasn't. We Are Mitch. But...
Good morning, Ms. Ryan. How are you this morning?
I'm fine, Marty. How are you? Happy holiday.
I'm doing just fine. And the same to you. I saw you a few weeks ago at the Mahogany Book events, and I just need to tell you, I want to thank you for your 25 plus years of service. Your voice is needed. I'm going to ask you to continue, in spite of all the criticism that you receive, continue to do the work that you do, continue to represent. And as a black man, I'm proud to see you wherever you show up. That's right. Just keep doing what you're doing. Don't stop. Thank you.
You crying? No crying in baseball.
Blanche, what kind of men are these type of people interested in?
That dude, first of all, when he came on, I knew he was zesty. So but to start crying, what? Hold up, time out. What has this woman done that has been so? What made this man cry? Like, come on, man, you gotta, come on, man. Nah, man, I can't do that. Nah,
He got lost for words.
No, man.
But as a single woman who's trying to put my toe back in the dating field, that kind of stuff is all over.
Oh,
I'm talking about like it's everywhere. Blanche, you know what? I told you about it. I told you. I'm like, yo, it's wild out here. It's wild. That is like, no woman can respect a man.
Beta.
Who is he about to lead? Who is he about to lead? And where do you think you leading somebody? Like, nobody is about to follow that. Like, you have got to be kidding me. Oh my God. You're just so great. And whatever. You probably ain't even read the book yet. Like,
Oh, I
come
know
on.
he ain't read the book.
Ridiculous.
I know he ain't read the book. I know that.
That is such a turnoff. Ugh, it's disgusting.
This, this dude started crying as if she. I can't. You know what? Back in the day, he would have been thrown out of the village. He would have been out of the village.
Yeah,
We would have tied him up, and took him off somewhere in the forest, and dropped him off. You gotta think for yourself, man.
Oh, my sides hurt.
I'm disgusted, man. I'm sorry. I'm
telling you.
disgusted.
Okay, look, I'm telling y'all, that kind of energy, that's like rampant. It's a lot. It is a lot of that. And they come off, they be big men, they be big and tall, and they look and I'm telling you.
So Keisha, you've been on a date, and y'all and the guys. So the guy starts crying in front of you. I'm just curious.
No,
Do these
they
guys
don't
cry?
cry in front of you, but they have this like, oh, the woman is just so. I think they're saying things that they think I want to hear, but I think they really believe it. Like, oh, the woman is so this and that, and
Queens could lead too.
Women should, yes, that kind of energy, just like this
Grand Rising,
like male feminists. They're like male feminists.
Grand Rising Queen, that kind of, yeah. That's disgusting, man. That's disgusting.
It is.
No, he started crying. I was cracking up when I heard that for the first time. Like, is he really crying? And he sounds like an older man too.
Older man.
That's what I'm saying. Like an old school. Like he know better, man. What's going on? Like, think about it. How did this guy survive Jim Crow, segregation? If he that, like, how did he make it through? You that weak? How you make it? Come on.
His
man.
mama was leading the Black Panther.
Right. We talking about water hoses, German shepherds, billy clubs, and you make it to the grand stage and start crying. Oh my goodness.
I forgot that I titled this Q Beta Male.
Yes.
God.
I wouldn't go ahead and play the rest of it. There's like a minute left to that clip, so let's see here.
Thank you. That's right. Just keep doing what you're doing. Don't stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. That, but it's wonderful when men are showing up at these events. It was powerful, Marty. Thank you. Men are leaning in. They sit on the edge of their seats, and they're listening to this.
What kind of men, though?
Because they love us, and they want to know how to love us more and support us, because they know that we're carrying a burden. And we're carrying a lot of load, Thank you, Marty. That's it.
Okay. All right. I mean, women are carrying a lot of burden, so I guess we're expected as men to sit on the edge of our seat and just wait to see how they'll overcome the burden that they're carrying. All right. I mean,
and you know what? She knows doggone well. If that man came up to her and he was doing all of that, hemming and hawing and crying and snotting and crying, she would give him the time of day. Because don't women respect that?
You're right. They
She would
don't.
be like, security,
I know what she
get
wants.
this crazy man around me.
I know what
She
she
wouldn't
wants.
give
She don't
him
want
the
no.
time of,
She don't want nobody playing around with her. Trust me. I know what she wants. She don't want. She
she
a
says
cougar.
she's engaged.
She a saber. She what?
I don't know. I think she's engaged. She says she got a fiance now.
Okay. Oh no,
Listen,
no, yeah, you're
that
right. She did say she has a fiance now. He's a former Marine or something like that. Like,
Oh
wow, they're making
no, that
Marines like that
saber
these
tooth.
days.
Right. That saber tooth done caught somebody, man. I'm trying to. Come on, man.
But not all the black
Wow.
male callers that called in were beta. Here's one that called in that wasn't picking up what she was putting down.
Hey, Brady from Burlington.
Yeah, you like the.
Whoops, that's not the one. This is the one.
Hi, Danny.
Congratulations on your fourth. Good morning. Congratulations on your fourth book. I wish I could write a book, but I really see
You
it
can
totally
go
different.
ahead, try.
Thanks. I really see it totally different than what you're saying, and
Okay.
I hate to
that's
be the naysayer, but look, when you look at the inner cities, the criminals and the victims are mostly young black men, and what are they the product of? Single black mothers. I see them single black moms as creating chaos and destruction because of their lifestyle. Now, until the
Their
culture
lifestyle.
changes, there's not going to be a change. And that's just not for single black women. I mean, single white women too, with kids. That's the problem. And we got to change the culture. And that's a reality. You can look at the statistics in Baltimore, Chicago, all these, And
Danny, let me give April Ryan a chance to respond.
Okay. So I'm so glad that Danny wrote that. Danny, I'm from Baltimore, and I'm a single black woman, and I'm raising two young black women, one in college and one in high school, to be productive and contributing members of society. So I take offense to that. I'm a single black woman. I'm divorced, getting married in 2023, but I've been single for a long time, and I'm black in Baltimore, in the Baltimore area. I am a stereotype. I fit into that box, but I don't. And that's one reason why I wrote the book, because what you just said smears a whole swath of women, a whole swath of people. You not only just said blacks, you talked about white women. I think you need to go back and really look at the stats. Black women are rising in number as head of household. Black women are rising in number as the breadwinner. Why? Because for generations, our men have been taken from us from the time we were ripped from our homeland, Africa. And women have been objectified, have been the wet nurse, been the workhorse, and everything. We are also the person who's underemployed, working several jobs to keep the home together. And sometimes things slip through the cracks. So you're not allowing for all of that in your darts that you threw at black women. I want you to look at the fact, since black women were taken from Africa and they were chosen to come from Africa to this nation to breed the workers, right? They were chosen because of the firmness of their breasts. Okay, one, objectified. Okay, if your breasts were perky, you made the journey. If your breasts sagged, oh, you were spoiled. You already had children. They wanted the meat to produce strength for free labor that this nation has worked on, that this nation has benefited from. Black women had to stand alone, because if a black man stood up for us, they were beaten or killed. We've had to stand by ourselves for generation after generation. And you want to know why they say we're strong? Because, or my mother was strong like her mother before her, like her mother before. You wonder where that came from? It came from the enslavement of Africans in this nation. We've had to be strong. We have risen in spite of. And for you to paint that broad brush picture, I am so sad, because I want you to go look at the stats. And for you to say that Black single women, I am a Black single woman. And I think you're wrong. I'm in that box and I'm not in that box. And you cannot paint that picture. In every community, there are issues we can work on, but you cannot paint that broad brush picture like that. Danny, I respectfully accept your question, but I reject it with this answer. Thank you.
So did the caller generalize? Perhaps. I mean, you only have a limited time to really get out what you want to say, but he wasn't talking about all single Black mothers. He's talking about the typical single Black mother that you think of, who's living a certain lifestyle, who's twerking on Hot Girl Summer, who is not taking care of her responsibilities, taking care of her children. That's what he was talking about. And it kind of speaks to what Blanche is talking about in terms of how there's there's no accountability. And when there's no accountability, you can't be corrected or criticized because you're right by the sheer fact that you're Black. But Chuck, I saw that you had some issues with what she was saying. Go ahead and speak your mind.
Man, I'm having a hard time going back to what you said in the beginning, Chad. I don't know if we was in the green room or how we started taping yet, but she wrote a book. Really? She's barely coherent. I just feel like Kevin Simon used to say, facts, data, statistics. Where's your seriously? This is how you feel the question? It's ridiculous. I wouldn't trust you to teach me or educate me about anything speaking like that. But anyway, yeah, I mean, like you said, Chad, he was, and then of course she wants to prove to the world that she's the exception to the rule, right? Because she's using her own anecdotal experience, but he's talking about, averages, right? I mean, if you look at sort of what Blanche said earlier when he talked about how roughly a fourth of African American women will marry in their lifetime, and if you see the rate of crime, particularly violent crime, amongst Black men, young Black men in particular, I mean, come on, man, there's an issue here. And even if we aren't talking about, the mothers that you don't, try and put, try to put their best foot forward in terms of, properly parenting their children, the fact still remains that God designed it male, female. There must be two. I don't care. You can put who was that? And I meant to ask you about this, Chad, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this, but I'd never asked you because I didn't do the research into it myself before I asked you, because I wanted to talk to you about this. But there's some rapper whose name escapes me right now, and y'all may have heard about this, who partnered up just recently with Steve Harvey for some charity kind of a thing that got going on right now called Single Black Mothers Are Single Black Mothers Are Superheroes, or Single Black Mothers Are Heroes, something like that. Look it up, Blanche. Gotta get my research department on it. But yeah, it's called something Black. But yeah, I asked my daughter one time. She had on a shirt, and the shirt said, I think she had went. I'm just quick little story. She had went to a friend of hers, went over her home, for the weekend or whatever. Had a little sleepover with one of her friends. She's 12 years old, and they went somewhere and came back, and they both had on these shirts, and on the shirt said "Girls Rule the World." Right, 12 years old, had on the shirt said "Girls Rule the World." Okay, she's 12. And I just simply asked her a question. I said, how can you rule what you can't defend? And she said, what? How can you rule what you can't defend? And she was kind of taken aback, and she scoffed at me. She said, Dad, you always asking me all, because I'm always throwing these open-ended philosophical questions at her that her brain doesn't have the cognition to understand at that age. But yeah, I just said, don't worry about it. I just said, you can't, what good is it to run something that you can't rule or run something or even save something, Miss Ryan, that you cannot defend? And this is part of the reason why I remember Dennis Prager had a very, very interesting a take on why God is depicted as male in the literature. He said what Keisha started off saying, that the spirit God is, it's not male or female, but God is depicted as male, as masculine in the Bible for a reason. Because when the man is not present, or when the man is out of control, then may heaven help us, because there's nothing that the woman can do to put the man back in line. Because what happens is, when you have a society full of immoral men, then of course the anatomically weaker of the species will become slaves to the mightier, and that is the male of the species. And so the discipline must come from the male, because only a strong man who has the correct paternal instincts, the correct masculine instincts, can put the overly emotional, immoral man who lacks virtue in his place. I don't care how strong a woman is, she cannot stand up to that. Only a man can do that. And so when you displace the man, you have chaos. This is why you have all the crime you have in our inner cities, to go back to what the caller started off saying. And she went on to this rant about a bunch of crap that had nothing to do with what he was talking about, because once again, she's trying to tug on your emotional heartstring.
Right. Keisha, your thoughts?
As I feel bad for April, I really do, because she's been in it's a lot of Black women who have been fed this idea that, this independent woman, I don't need a man, I can do it all by myself. It's like, okay, well, you go, girl. Like, I cannot, and I don't want to. But it took God to help me to be delivered from that mindset, because my mother, my dad, my parents were married for about 20 some odd years. So I grew up with my father in the home for a good part of my life. But in that, my mother was really, hurt. And that feminist mindset began to like really take over. And she was teaching us this idea of, I'm going to teach you how to do all these things. So you don't, so if you don't have a man that how to, I know how to like lay tile, I can do, like I can do all of these things that I don't want to do this stuff. I don't want to do it. But the ideas that she was instilling in me were so damaging. They were so damaging. April said, I'm teaching my daughters to be productive. I'm not teaching my daughters. I'm teaching my daughters to want to be housewives and
homemakers, yeah.
to want to be homemakers. I am not teaching them to, okay, if you want to go to college, fine, go to college. Go, if you want to do something like that, okay, do that. But while you're there, if you do decide, first of all, I'm not pushing them into college, because that's a whole, I'm not trying to push them into that indoctrination. But you need to be bringing over some cookies over to the to the doctors, and to the baking bread and making cookies and learning how to cook. That's what my daughters are learning, because this idea, it is so hard to get out of, because you hear it everywhere you go. You don't need a man, and you got to be independent and a strong Black woman. And you really start to believe this stuff. Clearly, April has really bought into this idea, because she's even teaching it to her children. And this is how, again, this stuff keeps getting replicated into society. And unless and until these ideas and beliefs are totally destroyed and the order is restored in the family, it is going to continue to be complete and total chaos. Because I'm sorry, a woman has no business, and yes, I'm going to say it like this: a woman has no business leading the home. First of all, our physical bodies are not even built to carry the weight of what it takes to work and provide and do all the. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. Like, I don't. And it's like, it's almost like you have to tell yourself the lie of, yeah, girl, amen, girl, we doing it, single women. Yeah. You have to tell yourself that lie because the reality of how hard it is to do it by yourself is too much. It's really too much, because I don't know one girl when she, because most girls do this, when you're little, you think about, your marriage, your wedding day and what your husband's going to be like. It's natural. Nobody has to show you how to do this. Like, this is what we do. We're playing with our Barbie dolls and we're like, my husband, yeah, he's going to go to work and I'm going to bake. And I mean, that's what we naturally want to do. And society wants to remove that from you, and then you maybe you get married, or you have a child out of wedlock or something, and now you're in this predicament where you are or you get divorced, and you're in this predicament where you're doing this thing by yourself, and nobody's telling these girls, these young women, that is not the life that you want. They are celebrating divorce. They tell you, oh yeah, yeah, girl, wait to get married. You don't want to be tied down, and why? So you can be out running the streets? Like, why would you do that? And I don't care how much we try to normalize this thing. No man wants a woman who is for the streets. Okay. And we all know what that means. No man wants that. No man wants that. And you can try to, they are trying to make girls believe that is okay. That's, it's an acceptable thing to do. The slut walk and all of these, this debauchery and just total depravity, that a man is supposed to want to bring that home to his mother. It is not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And so we see it already, like with TikTok, where all these girls are like talking about, all these men that they've slept with and what they do. It's crazy. It is wild. It is crazy. But no, they're going to hit a hard reality very, very soon. And it is going to be too much for them to bear. Exactly. And for all of the women who are listening or who may hear this, find yourself a good man and be a good wife. Be a good wife and be a good mother. Focus on doing that. And I promise you, like, your life will, you will feel very good about being that. So I'm sorry, that was a bit long, but it's too much.
Hey, Chad, can I jump in before you pass it?
Yeah, real quick. But Blanche,
pass it back to Blanche.
Blanche, he made a pretty good criteria of what makes a good wife earlier on his live. So I recommend everybody go back and watch that. But go ahead, Chuck.
Yeah, man. Just real quick. Just as a matter of fact, one of the first things that the Soviet Union did once the Russian Social Democrat Party took over was they made it extremely easy. I mean, they were one of the first major countries, or power, superpower countries, to come up with what we would consider a kind of what they call like no fault divorce, or irreconcilable divorce for irreconcilable differences, because prior to the Bolsheviks taking over Russia, I believe it was illegal to get a divorce in Russia, but once it became a lot easier to get divorced in Russia, the divorce rates in Russia skyrocketed once the communists took over Russia, and that was part and parcel of, or a large reason why was of course because of the writings of Friedrich Engels, who Friedrich Engels, Marx was married up until his wife or he died, and then I think his wife died. His wife died first, and he would die. But yeah, just Engels talked about how human beings need to pretty much that marriage is an institution of slavery. slavery in a sense, and we saw the second wave feminists, they would repeat that same line in their heyday. But of course, Friedrich Engels, because he was a serial, philanderer and whatever. He never married, but he was known for being a womanizer and a ladies' man, and he believed that people should be free to love, to be with whomever they choose to love, and of course by love he meant sex. But I did, real quick, and I'm gonna let you go ahead, Blanche. I did find what I was talking about. Some rapper producer named Metro Boomin. I don't know if y'all know who that is, but he launched a campaign. Yeah, producer called Single Moms Are Superheroes, and he partnered up with Steve Harvey and his wife. This is something I thought was right up your alley, Chad. I knew this might have crossed your radar. You would have did something with this, but yeah, it's this whole thing that they did. They took 150 single mothers and they had some single mom enrichment retreat, and they gave them all a $25,000 scholarship to further their studies and all this stuff. But you can look into it. Yeah, single moms are superheroes, and of course the shucking and jiving, smiling Negro Steve Harvey himself was right along with the cause, and so
of course he was.
Yeah, you have. Of course he was.
Go ahead, Blanche.
My favorite Steve Harvey quote is, "We black out here. We gotta do it another way." He was up there doing a minstrel show in front of you. We black. You can't flex. He can't flex that way. He got. My goodness.
A minstrel show Negro, man.
Man, goodness. I think that there's a difference between a woman that's been married and divorced and has children versus a baby mama, or even a woman that has a child as a single mother. Is still different than a baby mama. The baby mama culture is different than a single mother. My mom was a single mother, but she wasn't a baby mama, if that makes sense. So I think a lot of the problems is a culture that goes with, like one girl even said, I remember she just talking about, she went to go see Drake, and she said that Drake flew her out there, hit her up in her DMs, flew her out there, had her sign an NDA. They had sex, they didn't use a condom. And she says that he kept rubbing her stomach, asking her, does she want to have children? And the way she just said, yeah, if you want to get me pregnant, I'll have your baby. Like, it's just the way she said it. It was just so like, I want a pair of shoes. I want a purse. Like, she just with a child. And I said, that's it right there. The culture of being a baby mama is, to me, what's happening. And it's almost like it's celebrated. If you have a child with a guy that's quote unquote doing something, then it's almost, it's even better than being married. Like with Rihanna and A$AP Rocky, that whole, the power couple have a child, don't have to get married. But Keisha, I think women like Keisha need to speak to these young girls and impart some wisdom and tell them that the future of what y'all are doing is not going to be good. If you listen to Eartha Kitt or Diane Carroll, their last years were bad. Like it wasn't riding off into the sunset on a horse. It was like almost in a hearse, riding into the sunset. It wasn't good. And so even Amber Rose, I guarantee in the next 5 or 6 years, she's going to have that come to Jesus moment. All these women doing this stuff now, there comes a point in time where reality sets in and you realize that you burnt all your good years up. Nobody wants to be with you. And now what do you do? Because you're not going to care about feminism. You're not going to care about the left, the liberals. You're not going to care about none of that stuff because you're going to be at home by yourself. And you're going to want the companionship of a decent man. But yeah, Keisha needs to be imparting his wisdom onto these ladies because they need to hear it from somebody like you. Because when men say it, we sound, toxic, suppressive and all that stuff. But when you say it, it may hit home a little better because you are a woman. And I just think that the majority of women keep this stuff a secret about how this stuff really ends up. I remember one lady I know, she's like in her 50s. She said, she was crying. She said, I don't want to be alone anymore. I mean, what do I tell her? Like, You're 55 years old. I mean, I don't want to say give up hope, but who are you going to get out there on the market at 50? I'm just saying, at 55 years old, most of the guys are either married or they sugar daddies. Like it's gonna be tough. I'm sorry. Like, you
Come
can't,
here, girl.
you can't, you know what I'm saying? Like, you can't burn up your 20s and your 30s and then your 40s and then talk about I'm ready to settle down at 55. Come on, you can't. It's not gonna work. But anyway, I told her to pray. So.
Yeah.
Blanche, were you always
She
this
needs to do
hilarious?
that prayer.
My family, I'm going to say it like this, right? My mom used to talk to me so crazy as I look back. My mom used to talk to me crazy, man. I'm talking about no filter, she used to tell me the craziest things. I'm talking about just brutal, man. Listen, I used to get in trouble, and my mom had a section in my closet that was all 70s clothes, right? It was all butterfly collars, and it was the worst outfits. If I got in trouble, I would get a whooping, and then the next day I would have to wear the 70s outfits to school. So I used to get the whooping, go to school, and get ridiculed. Like, my mom was, listen. So I had to learn how to just even laugh at myself and, crack. It was rough, man. But my mom wasn't playing, man. It was brutal.
Yeah, you know what is funny, Blanche? I was when I was watching the content of about April Ryan and the book and everything that Chad had sent. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do some more videos or start doing more content on that, because these nobody's telling these girls like, yo, it is you don't want to be older, trying to date. I mean, when it's you just don't want to do it. But yeah, I am going to start doing that. I think that's some very good advice that I will certainly take. So,
And Kevin Samuels, by the way, before he passed, he was putting up numbers in terms of reconciling marriages, in terms of like causing women to kind of rethink this kind of modern womanhood that's being actively indoctrinated and instilled into the minds of young women, and causing them to reconsider and rethink traditional womanhood. So he was actually putting up a lot of numbers in that regard. Of course, he wasn't perfect. Of course, he espoused and stood for some things that I disagree with. But I think numbers speak for themselves in terms of people who were able to kind of get out of the dating market and really find a spouse as a result of reconsidering a lot of the things that this modern culture teaches them. So kudos to Kevin Samuels for that.
I was a fan.
Yeah,
I thought everything that he said was on point. I mean, not everything, but yeah, he was needed.
Yeah.
He was needed. And you do see some younger girls, some younger women who are saying, you know what, I don't, this life of being somebody's baby mother, that's not very appealing. And so you are starting to see these conversations come up. So I am very happy to see that.
I do think that there's a deficit, though, in Black women talking about the juxtaposition between traditional womanhood and modern womanhood. Like, I don't think that there's enough Black women talking about that. Black or modern womanhood is a cancer, as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't only affect Black women; it affects all ethnicities of women. It affects women. In terms of, again, the thing is like, I have a lot to say on this particular subject. I think that because I grew up in the 90s, or I was born in 1990. So I came up in the 90s. So it was kind of like the golden age of Disney. You had Lion King, you had Aladdin, you had a lot of these films coming out that we all knew. We could all quote them by heart, so on and so forth. And not only that, but it was this time frame in which even the older Disney movies we watched and we enjoyed. These days, if you try to put Cinderella, for example, the original Disney Cinderella in front of a kid, they would be bored with it 15 minutes in because of the graphics not being up to modern standards. Whereas in the 90s, we could watch the movie Cinderella, even though it was made 40 years before we were born, and enjoyed it. And I say that to say this. We kind of gleaned our thought process and what to expect when it comes to relationships from Disney and from film and television and music. The R&B in the 90s was very detrimental in terms of how we thought about sex, in terms of how we thought about relationships, so on and so forth. So I say that to say that many of us, unfortunately, drew our worldview, our the way that we think about relationships, the way that we think about ourselves sexually, is informed by this kind of modern culture and the relics therein, versus what the Bible says about relationships, what the Bible says about manhood and womanhood, what we see in our own photo albums when we look back at our great grandparents and our grandparents. So again, our psyche, our worldview is more shaped by the entertainment industry, more so than what God himself, who designed the world, who designed marriage, who created these things. We ignore what he says and we look instead to what the culture says. And so I believe that even though it looks good on Disney, even though it looks good on a Hallmark card, even though it looks good on television, it doesn't quite work out in reality. And as a result, you have a lot of failed relationships. You have a lot of depression and anxiety as a result of putting into practice the things that you learned from entertainment. And so the reason why Kevin Samuels was such a breath of fresh air is because he was speaking such a raw truth that deconstructed all of the lies and misconceptions that we've been taught, and bringing it back to the basics. And a lot of the things that he was saying was biblical. He would, of course, show his humanity and talk about things like, well, if you're a man of high value, you deserve the right to cheat. I rejected that. However, when he talked about, traditional womanhood, traditional manhood, things of that nature, those are concepts of the Bible. So he didn't even originate them. He was just kind of repopularizing these age-old truths that we've abandoned as a modern culture, if all that makes sense. So, did anybody want to respond to that before I play this last clip?
Oh yeah, just one thing real quick. I have a friend of mine, and we were talking about modern women and this new culture, and he said what's funny is he said that women are modern until it comes to relationships. He said these women are very conservative in relationships because you talk to them about what they want. They want a traditional man. Like they want a man to take care of everything and they can not have to work, and that he the things they actually want is a conservative lifestyle, but their quote unquote, I guess, view of the situation is from a modern woman's standpoint. But he did bring up a good point. And when I talk to women, when you talk to them about what they actually really want, it's really a traditional man. It's really a guy that's going to come and take care of everything, lead the household. Because you ask him, do you want to, like even Kevin Samuels would say it, he said, do you want to have to work? They'd be like, no. Do you want to have to do this? They'd be like, no. So it's funny because they're like feminists in a sense, but when the door closes, I want to be a wife. So it's kind of just weird existence of the modern woman and what she really wants when it comes to relationships.
Yeah, 100%. Do you believe, Blanche, that a traditional man and a modern woman are compatible in a relationship?
No. No. I mean, honestly, I would say this. I would say that it's easier to me for a modern woman to get a traditional guy than the other way around. I think it's more men that are probably more conservative in thinking and actions than there are women. And I would say in Black culture. Because even the girls that I know that have some sense, like I said earlier, that have some sense, are educated and everything, they still kind of indulge in the, the ratchet culture. They still kind of like all that stuff. So it's kind of like, and most of them, I'm sorry to say, most of them vote Democrat. Most of their idols are uh, Michelle Obama,
Maxine Waters.
what's her name?
Yeah.
Maxine Waters, Kamala Harris. I mean, so even the women that are quote unquote the good girls, they still, their ideology is still with that foolishness. So I just think no, it wouldn't work, but I think it's a lot easier for them to do it than it is for us.
Yeah. And I would pose the same question to you, Keisha, but I think you already answered it just when you mentioned the dating scene right now, with regard to whether or not a traditional woman is compatible with a modern man. The crying beta feminist man obviously stands no chance with a traditional woman, right?
Correct. A traditional man is not going to put up with all the foolishness of a modern woman. He's not even going to be. He might be fooled for a little bit, but he's not marrying a modern woman. He's going to find he's going to find his wife. He's going to find a woman that suits him, which and as he should. And the beta man, he's he will like the modern woman, and he will get ran over. She will be brutal to him, and he will be further emasculated, which is wrong. It's wrong. And I think the modern woman will recognize what she's doing, and she'll continue to she'll do it as long as he allows. I don't. Those two, they are not compatible. And that's like destruction waiting to happen.
Sounds very volatile. All right, so we're gonna play this last clip as we roll on out. I titled this one "Vulnerable Black Women." So let's see what April Ryan has to say about this subject.
You end the book on the issue of vulnerability. Why don't you think that Black women are allowed to show vulnerability?
Because we're not allowed, because the nation thinks we're strong. We are strong. We're strong because we've had to be strong from the moment that we were stolen from our country and brought to this nation. We were strong because, our men were ripped from us when we were slaves, and we had to stand strong. So because of that generational strength, people don't see us as vulnerable. We are always moving to uplift the home, uplift the community, uplift the church. No one sees us as vulnerable. Oh, she's so strong, but we are. And no one also sees us as the standard of beauty, and we are. And that's one of the reasons why I love this cover, because it shows strength, it shows giving women their flowers, it shows femininity, and it also shows vulnerability. And the problem is that we are so strong and have had to be strong because of what was placed on us for centuries. People don't see our vulnerability. We hurt, we bleed, and we are vulnerable.
Chuck, thoughts?
Well, let me say this.
I don't know. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Keith. I guess I'll go. Keisha, did you want to go?
I'll be quick. I don't think that April, again, it's like I don't know what world she's living in. I don't know one real man who walks by a woman who's being vulnerable, who's in pain, who's being hurt, who's being harmed, who's in a weaker state, and just walks by her and is like, oh, like what? Like it's like she's never really been around real men. It just doesn't seem that way. Like, as a woman that's been married, like, there is a way, and this is what we do need to learn this. And I didn't learn this until, later on, but there is a way to express what you need from your husband, from your spouse, from, and it's not, it's not aggression. It is never aggression. Never aggression. If you want to push your husband away, be aggressive. If you want to pull your husband in and get him to hear you, be feminine, be soft, be vulnerable. Like that is what real man is going to look at his wife in her being soft and feminine and be like, whatever you're crying about or whatever the problem is, like that's on you. Like I don't like that. That's just not how men respond. So it's just weird that she thinks that that society doesn't, respond to vulnerable women. Like even in like the Titanic, it's like save the women and the children. Like it's like that's what everybody knows, that you need the women and the children to live. They need to be taken care of so they get, so life can continue.
Yeah.
Men are very aware of this naturally. It's just a natural thing. God made it's natural. And women have to learn that comes from the world, that comes from society. Like, oh, I got to be tough and strong, and he just needs to accept my strength. It's like, no.
Yeah.
If you want to,
the Leslie
if you want
Jones
to appeal
energy.
to, oh God.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that. So I feel like watching more of this. Like I really feel bad for her. Like she's never been around a real man, and she's definitely, it doesn't sound like she's ever been loved by a real man, and she doesn't sound like she's ever like she's just been inundated with that I gotta be strong, and I am woman, hear me roar. And she better get rid of all of that before she jumps into this marriage, because she needs to get that together before she
I don't
gets
see
married.
that
It's not gonna
marriage
work very
lasting
well.
very long, unless he's just like an ornament. Like I just don't see it lasting very long at all.
Or unless she's different in behind closed doors, because
Yeah.
I think that's like the Beyonce thing. Like
Yeah.
I believe Beyonce is like the quintessential wife. But in public, she's like, which is a whole nother thing. But anyway,
Yeah.
Mike, that's all I have on that.
Go ahead, Chuck.
Let me say that I'm cracking up. I'm laughing at they was going so hard on April Ryan in the comment section. Somebody said she like the Cookie Monster with that blue turtleneck on. And like, man, I cannot get past that turtleneck. Stimulated student was clowning in the comment section. But nah, man, she has said a lot of things. I mean, first of all, she keeps talking about how black women were stolen from. First of all, black Africans, they weren't stolen. They were traded, and they weren't stolen. Another thing as well, talked about how the fathers were stripped away and all this other stuff. But the reality is that black children during the time of slavery were more likely to grow up with their father in the home, even during slavery, than they are right now. That is a statistical fact. People say, well, it was illegal for slaves to marry. I didn't say anything about marriage, but the families were together, intact, and in the same home. But when I think about this, I think about, Kimberly, I think it was Kimberly Crenshaw's 80-something page work on whiteness as property. And I refer to James Lindsay, the way he explains understanding Marxism. And I know I brought up Marx a lot tonight, but it's vital that we understand the left, and it's vital that we understand the writings and the teachings and the ideas of Karl Marx to fully understand what is happening in our society today. But when James Lindsay talks about understanding Marxism, he simply says only thing that you have to do, as complicated as it may seem at times, is to think about the thing that is being owned. Marx talked about property, and the type of property that he hearkened on the most, of course, was capital. But when you think about property, think about privilege in terms of who has access to a certain kind of property. In this case, I guess the kind of property or the thing being owned, when you talk about the dichotomy between male and female, is of course masculinity, because the narrative played up by the left is that he who specializes or monopolizes in masculine behavior reaps the benefits of that the society has to offer. And so you must tear down these conventions in order to allow for more people to have access to the estuaries or the citadels of privilege. And so what we consider masculine behavior versus feminine behavior, where there is no such thing eternally or fundamentally, is that those things only exist to the extent that they serve the interests of the powerful. And the powerful, in this case, of course, are men. It's men. So women say, well, screw femininity, forget, you know what I'm saying, because I want access to privilege that you are keeping me out of by essentially brainwashing me and enculturating me into believing that I have to act a certain way because you want the benefits that are offered by the society. And so this is why we have so many women who are disorderly and what have you, because they feel as though they have to rebel against conventions in order to get what is rightfully due to them. But we all know that that is in fact a facade. And I'll just end it like this. And you know, I'm like a poor man's expert on Marx. And he once said, and this is a quote, I believe it was in a letter that he wrote to Frederick Engels. He says, "Blessed is the man who has no family." And the context of that quote was he was frustrated with his wife, particularly with his role as a husband and as a father, because he was a terrible father, a terrible husband, a terrible leader in terms of, you know, leading his family. He had 6 children. 4 of them would die before he would die, and the 2 daughters that survived him would both go on to commit suicide. And his wife Jenny was constantly on his head because he didn't make money. The family living situation was hell. They were constantly destitute. They could hardly feed themselves. They wore raggedy, disheveled clothing. It was just like, dude, as a man, this is your job. And Marx was just, you know what? I don't even want to have to deal with this. And that's the full context of that quote, because he'd much rather not even have to deal with the responsibility of being a husband and a father, because it was too burdensome for him. So blessed is the man that has no family. And you wonder why the family is in the state that it is in today. It's the left. This is the legacy of Karl Marx.
Yeah, and what you just said and how you just ended that is the exact reason to bring that up. Karl Marx, again, is the grandfather of the modern left in terms of
the modern left.
Yeah, in terms of where they are, in terms of where they are trying to take this country, in the way that they've infiltrated the various facets of American culture and hell, the world's culture, in terms of marching down this quest toward globalism, which, to bring everything back full circle, with April Ryan's book of Black women saving the world, when you look at a lot of April Ryan's journalism, when you look at a lot of the things that she espouses when she's being interviewed and what have you, there's a lot of tinges of socialism in the things that she says. So I would venture to say that she is either explicitly Marxist, or she believes in Marxist ideology without realizing that it's Marxist ideology. Either way, that's what she's pushing. And so to the question of what does she mean by save the world, what she means is that it is Black women who will usher in socialism, globalism, into the entirety of the world. This is a point that Blanche makes all the time. I want to give Blanche the last word, but before I do that, another thing that we didn't get to in April Ryan's speech or interview this evening was when asked what was her example of a strong man. She went on to give Ibram X. Kendi a name as to what she believes is a strong man. Tiny Hesi Coates, who wrote the book Between the World and Me, and Michael Eric Dyson, who Chuck quoted earlier. The common denominator between all three men are that they are beta, kind of complainy type of men. And I use the word man, for lack of a better word. Exactly. These are people who make a living complaining about being black. There's a quote that you can't mention the name Tiny Hesi Coates without this quote coming to mind, because for me it's the one that he's famous for, which is, to be black is to walk through the world and seeing people doing things that you cannot do, that you cannot join in and do. These are his words. And so here you have this 40-something-year-old black man making such statements before largely white audiences and getting a standing ovation. If that's not chucking and jiving, I don't know what is. And so these are examples that you give as far as who a strong man is. And so this goes back to what Keisha said numerous times throughout this live tonight, that Miss Ryan has not been around real masculine men. Because if the examples that you're giving are three complaining, weak, limp-wristed men who write books complaining about the color of their skin, then, I mean, I just don't know what else to say to that. But Blanche, go ahead.
Just really quick before.
Go ahead.
Can I just? It's so fascinating to me that she could, that she goes to those three men. I didn't know this part, but she goes to them, and there is nothing more emasculating than for a man to say that another man is keeping them from doing what they need to do in the world. Like, what in the world? Like, you're literally saying that some man that has no name, just some white man, is keeping you from like providing for your family and being all that you can be in the world. So really, that's your God, because the God of God is not your God. Like, that's your God, because
Exactly.
he controls everything for you. Anyway, that's wild.
No, great point. Fantastic point. All right, Blanche, you have the last word. Go ahead and take it away.
Ta-Nehisi Coates, looked up his net worth, and it's $6 million. So I'm just trying to figure out, what can't you do if your net worth is $6 million? And so he's a simp. All these guys are simps. Listen, the lady, Miss Ryans, she probably has a typical story. She dealt with bad men, had a bad experience, single mom, got kind of jaded. Now she said, I'm going to empower myself. The easiest thing to do is the hustle race. She got into the race hustle game. She wrote a book with the greatest title ever, How Black Women Are Going to Save the World. Like, who wouldn't buy it? Who wouldn't want to read it? She's about to get to some guy. He's either 80 years old or I don't know. But anyway, I'm going to just say this, right? All this stuff is really an attack on the family. And I feel like now more than ever, family is important. I think Chuck mentioned it earlier about, having all this chaos and dysfunction, and how they feed into that decadent nature. Or maybe you said, Chad, but if you think about it, think about bringing a woman home to your family, but you don't really have a family. Like, there's no standard of a family to bring the girl home to. So what would you even measure it to? So now even a relationship that's supposed to be functional is going to be dysfunctional because it's all chaotic. You just have people just getting together or whatever. I just think that, this lady, she's like all the rest of them. She's a race hustler. And instead of her promoting family, instead of her promoting doing something about this marriage rate, doing something about the abortion rate, doing something about everything, the violence, everything that's plaguing our community. She's talking about being kidnapped from Africa, which, as Chuck said, is a farce because the first people to do shipping and handling was Africans. They started the first Amazon
Shipping and
when
handling.
they had the slaves. They they had the slaves. The white folks showed up to the shore and they had the slaves ready to go. They just they were shipping them out. So anyway, I'm just saying she's just it's just all propaganda, right? It's all propaganda. It's just all propaganda. So anyway, I just think that family is important, and even though she's getting married and talking about how she's a different single mother, notice that she never really gave real attributes to the women. Like she never said these women were like honest. Y'all still laughing? Okay.
That's a new one. That's hilarious.
Yeah, man, y'all making me look.
Oh man.
But I mean it is true though. I mean it was technically shipping and handling because you put them on a ship. I mean that's what it is though. You put them on the ship, you sell them. I mean shipping them out. I mean the first that was the first Amazon or the first Congo. I guess the first company was called Congo. I don't know. But anyway, I'm just
The first
I just want
Amazon. Hey, come on, man. Y'all clown.
yeah,
Lord
just
have
family's
mercy.
important. That's all I'm saying.
Agreed.
Hey, Africans started the first Amazon.
Well, think about it.
Yeah,
Black folks
that's
invent
in the bio
everything,
of
right?
accomplishments. Yeah, we did invent everything. Let them tell it.
Think
Everything goes
right,
back
right. So
to Mother
Jeff Bezos
Africa,
got
so we
that
put
from
that on the
us,
list too.
right?
Yeah.
All right, that was a great live discussion. April Ryan's book, "Black Women Will Save the World." I cannot wait to not buy that book. Anyway,
Right.
all right. You all have a good night. Be blessed. Love y'all.
You
All right,
too.
man.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Worship God, not
Oh, yeah.
man. That's right. Take care.
Amen.